Good afternoon. Today is Monday, April 25th, 2022, and the time is 12:02. On the workshop today, the order of business and the purpose is we have the agenda review of April 26th. We have the legislative report. We have the conversation regarding the superintendents, and that looks like that will be it. So, Dr. Savage, if you would go ahead and start us off with the agenda review, that would be great.
Yes, Madam Chair, it'd be my privilege. The first question we have comes under the J1 consent item for human resources. The first question which is the approval for personnel recommendations. First question is District Planning Director, Planning Growth Capacity. Please explain the need, job description, how important this position is to the district. Please advise if this was advertised in-house and also outside, as I'm concerned that it was not advertised very long, in less than 1 week seems to be a very short time period. Why was it not advertised longer? Also, the movement of the district planning director to coordinator, was that an open position or a new position? This position is still in the same department, correct? Question mark. We'll go and do that one first.
And I'm sorry, before we start that, yes, I apologize. Is Ms. Morgan and Ms. Patrica online? Mr. Bruno?
I believe that Ms. Patrica is still in the
other meeting?
Yes.
So she'll join us when she's finished out of her meeting. But do we have Ms. Kathleen Morgan on the phone with us? I want to make sure we don't have to call her. And Ms. Vaughn will be with us within the next 5 minutes. Soon Ms. Giovanelli's on her way as well. I know that Ms. Patrica is in another meeting up in Tallahassee. I just didn't want him to have to repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. Understood. Thank you for catching me.
Pre-burner, do you think we should? Oh, here's Mr. Audrey. Nobody's online? You want to call her? Okay. If you want to go ahead and continue.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. Typically, if it's a human resource item, we'd have our executive director for HR answer the question. But in this particular one, since it is an operations recommended hire, just want to give a chance for Mr. Ross, who is available today, to answer this question. Mr. Ross?
Is it push? No. Push a button?
All right. Good afternoon. Frederick Ross, Executive Director of Operations. So yes, this job description can be provided by our Human Resource Department, and it is also on our website. The district planning department is very important, vital to our growth management and our educational planning, our educational facility planning, and leads that planning department in doing that work. So vital, important. This position was advertised for 1 week. Typically, positions are advertised anywhere from 1 week to longer, depending on the need of the department. In terms of the coordinator position, that is an open position. We had someone leave that position in January of this year. So that position is an open position in the planning department. And I think I addressed all of those questions in there.
Okay, and then Ms. Giovanelli, or afternoon. So we're, did you have any other questions regarding, because I know that was yours.
My concern is that it was not advertised very long. I mean, and I'm sorry, was it advertised outside of the district? Or
yes, it was both internal and external.
Great, that's what I wanted, because there seems to be some confusion over that. So I'm just trying to get clarity for the community. And also, people think the position is just for planning of schools, and it's not really that. It's planning with the new schools. I'm sorry, let me say the word verbiage right. And there's a confusion of that. So I really wanted that to be clear. It's the planning of who's going to attend this, how many people are going to be in the schools, like how many students are going to be in schools. Trying to get that on this level, not this one. So, and that's where the confusion was, because that was actually my confusion from the beginning. So that's why I raised that. And we have a severe problem, and, our school choice is not the, it's not the optimum, right? I mean, it's not. So we know that there's issues. So, and there's definitely issues this year. I feel like I've received many calls that my child didn't get in the school, and they literally live within 2 miles of the school, and that shouldn't happen. So I can't explain it. Go ahead.
Well, I just have to thank you for bringing this. I think sometimes in our world, educators, we're often guilty. We use acronyms and things and then forget that most folks have no idea what we're talking about. I think this is just such a really good point, and I really want to thank Ms. Giovanelli for even bringing it up. One of so a lot of people think of planner, they think of municipal planners, which is a very specific body of work that they do. School-based planners are very different. While there are some areas where they overlap in terms of working with local municipalities and looking with zoning and comp plans and so forth, the school-based planning really has a whole different type of additional set of responsibilities that are very specific to schools. Add that to our district, which is very unique, I would argue, the most challenging aspect of our planning here at this district is because we are a choice district. So they are responsible for setting our program capacity with budget and student enrollment. And so some of the examples that we're living through right now that Ms. Giovanelli talked about, where people live right near a school and are not in it, those are absolutely directly related to the program capacity, as well as projecting what you're going to have in the fall enrollment. And so this drives the budget, which is huge. This drives the staffing, which is huge. And this drives our daily student enrollment. So when you talk about all of those critical pieces that intersect at this one vital piece, that is what happens, and that is the biggest significant issue to us, not necessarily just the planning of new schools and the architecture design work, which is great. All those things are really important, but that one piece is so unique to Lee County. So thank you for trying to find a way to help us translate that for the public and for anyone who doesn't. If they want to understand the term program capacity, that is a huge part of our identity as a district. It is so unique just to Lee County. Too. So thank you for that, and I know Frederick's been living this challenge every day since he took the job.
And I just want to apologize for not understanding, and I truly did not understand. And it took a little bit for it to sink in for me, because there's a lot that goes into, and my newsletter editorial was about that a little bit. The understanding, the planning and preparation for the next year is huge. And it's a huge undertaking that starts early. And when we get behind that, I feel like us delaying this has caused some of that. So I really personally want to apologize for that, sincerely, because it's important that everybody is in the right seats of the bus, and teachers are allowed the opportunity to change their seat if they want to be closer to home or for whatever reason. So this starts that process right now, and that planner is actually it's part of that major process. So I just really want to, that's why I really brought it back up, is just for people to understand it better and for me to actually apologize.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the clarity that you just explained. Ms. Gittens?
Well, okay, here was the confusion for me. And I spoke to someone that clarified it to an extent. The way it looked overall, this position was going to be someone taking Kathy Eball's position and running, planning, growth, and capacity.
That's right.
Okay. But then it was explained to me that this person was basically going to give from the perspective of a principal to add that view to all of it. This is where the confusion came in. So if they're replacing someone who has done this, and this, but they're only doing this and this, Do you understand how people get confused? Because, and I always had heard that, yes, the perspective of an administrator that's been in a building is important, but in the past, when we're building a school, there's a committee of administrators. When they were building LAMs, they had 2 or 3 administrators that had the same floor plan as LAMs to sit in on the meetings and say, if I could, make some changes to my building that's this floor plan, I would put this here. And they listened, and that's why LAMs has a few little tweaks and things that are different from the other floor plan of those same middle school. So, you've already got this in place where you call in people to do that, and then we're saying now we have someone that's going to be full-time doing that, but then they're replacing someone who did all of these other things. Do you understand the confusion?
Oh, I think you just put it very nicely. I want to clarify, just because this is a very hard thing to explain, and I think we have to do a better job explaining this, because I think when people are out there wondering, answering lots of questions, even for board or staff members, I think it's necessary. I think just to add a point of clarity, we still do and have invited principals to be a part of that building design process, which is one small part, but one part of the lion's share of that whole area of purview, which is getting that input. I can tell you that as a person who participated in that process, how helpful it was to have it. And I think specifically, as you mentioned, having people who worked in that exact footprint of building was so helpful as well. The challenge, of course, the part that we certainly wouldn't be bringing a person in just to provide that design level, that's just one small piece that they would check. The part that I think is really instrumental for us as a district, that is, we're just dependent on, it really goes more to the heart of what Ms. Giovanelli was saying, which is an understanding that just because there's numbers, student numbers associated to a room via the fish, this is what the student stations that this site carries, that in practice, when you're actually putting students in a building, that is so important. And examples of that being done improperly would be an example of, I have 10 teachers in a cart in another school that has a similar percent capacity, yet has no teachers in a cart. Right. So on paper, to the state, they look like they are the same, and they're both a certain amount over, but in reality, in a practical program delivery, one is absolutely struggling, and the teachers don't get any type of appropriate professional experience, and the others, they may even have an open rooms. It's simply in the numbers. And so that's why having people who truly have administered a program in a school adds such a value, not just during the facility construction time, which you were bringing up, which is also very important, but during that daily capacity and enrollment where they really understand it fundamentally. And that's why so much of the school-based planning, when you really go through the job description and read it, about half of it really has that very much a specific to school concept. And that's all these tasks as it relates to school-based planning as opposed to municipal planning.
So my last question with this is the individual that we would be approving tomorrow going to be over all of planning, growth, and capacity?
Yes, they would be over the planning department, which manages our growth management and our educational facility planning, yes.
So are we actually switching this person for the other person that was in the position?
Correct. The current director will become the coordinator within the department.
So they are at the top of in planning, growth, and development?
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Vaughn.
Sounds like, to me, we're doing a bad trade, that we're trading someone who has the wheelhouse, at least on paper, of being someone who knows about land and everything that goes into it, and how much, the GRs and all of that, but was deficient, apparently, in what we're just now talking about in student numbers and what Mrs. Giovanelli was talking about when I came in. Mm-hmm. For somebody who's really good with the other side of it, but not no real experience. And so the reason that I continue to not support this, and I don't support it, as I've said several times, with the statute not qualified, this time, let's get it right. Let's get it a person that knows both sides and knows both sides well. And I'm just going to say it for the third or fourth time, as I've said it in the one-on-ones, nothing against this person. I'm sure he would be wonderful in what we're talking about, but I want to see somebody who is an expert on both sides of this and not train, or you're going to have to revamp the job description and have co-people in, one who has the expertise in what we're just now talking about, and one who has the expertise in the land deals, in the real estate, in those kinds of issues. And this, as a school board member, is what I would like to see. And again, it's because I feel this person is not qualified on both sides. And I also feel that it's really an important issue for the school board because individuals, let's say, that were not, trying to think of good, high level or not totally understanding some things, have cost us a lot of money as a board, including the school in Estero and some other issues that it's had a fiscal impact on us on a board. Those are my two reasons that I'm not going to support this.
And I would just say thank you for sharing your, your feedback. I would say, with the person, and I'm not going to get into talking about the person who is labeled deficient on this one, I would say we had a person in the current role who is on paper extraordinarily qualified and was not actually hired for that job initially, was actually hired into Frederick's job. So because the person came from another district and had done all of those things, truly did have an understanding of all the aspects that you would look for on paper for that role. Just to add some clarity, the school-based planner is a very small community. So if you were to hire, let's say, a municipal planner, someone who looks extraordinarily qualified from land use and comp plan, the likelihood that they have also done school-based planning is very slim. Vice versa, if you were to hire someone who is a school-based planner, you'd literally have to be hiring someone else's school-based planner, which in some cases, districts smaller than us, it may only be a single person who holds that role. So you'd have to be recruiting in what is a very, very small community. Our job is to bring forward recommendations of folks who absolutely have the professional diligence to handle not only all the aspects that are there, and again, memorizing statutes, understanding these pieces, that is all something that every job that any leader here has had to do. To put it on a different coin for a second, just to give you a comparable analogy, when a principal goes to a school, they haven't had to teach all subjects. They haven't had to teach language arts, math, science, social studies. Certainly it helps them if they have, and ESE and everything else. But what they have to have is enough understanding and diligence to understand all the applicable laws and rules and programs that apply to all those things. And then they are accountable, as the leader of that school, for those services to be provided in every school every single day for all the different students, no matter what their wealth of experience was. They have to manage a large budget. They are not necessarily expected to be an expert in all aspects of it, but they certainly must demonstrate the professional competence and diligence to carry out their duties, and they're accountable for that. And in fact, they're graded as a school to do so. What we would recommend coming through, and I really applaud Frederick's recommendation on this piece, is a wonderful opportunity to bring a actual person with tremendous school-based background into a division that has extraordinarily few people who have actually supervised in a school or ever carried out those duties, and yet their decisions impact the school in extraordinary ways, such as 10 teachers on carts. Those are the kinds of things that happen in a school when you don't necessarily have an understanding of how the rubber meets the road, when the numbers on the page impact students and teachers in the classrooms. So with respect afforded to you, if you can share with me where you would because I understand you're vetting the candidate, and that's your right to say that you feel that they're unqualified, considering that the people who interviewed this candidate for numerous jobs felt that this person was qualified. The supervisor whose charge it is to be accountable for this area has recommended the person is qualified. The HR division has recommended the person is qualified. And I am telling you the person is qualified based on all of our professional judgments. You are well within your right to disagree, but I would just say that is the basis upon which we bring that recommendation forward today for that and all the other pieces that we've explained through multiple meetings at this point.
May I add?
Ms. Vaughn?
With all due respect, I was part of charter faculty in a large high school in Dallas, and I've watched this firsthand. We assign here our principals. We already know principals, like some of these large schools, a year in advance. They have the whole year, basically, to figure out some of these things, to bring in their experts. For instance, somebody who's going to teach, I don't know, maybe a specialized computer class. Well, what do you need? What size room? These principals are also the ones that are assigned to run these schools, to open these schools. They also need to be knowledgeable, and if they're not a good choice, I'm sorry to say. And honestly, many of us, any of us who've been on the opening side of a school and watched it, we know a lot of that stuff as well, honestly, and we're smart enough to say, yeah, I know about these classrooms, and it's terrible. We do not want, I mean, I've done planning of scheduling before it was on the computer, sitting down and putting teachers in rooms for my department. It's painstaking, but it's not brain surgery. We need somebody in this district who is the expert in both areas. And I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to say that I don't know the candidate. I don't know the candidate. But, it would be like somebody who didn't know me and amazingly didn't like me, but would say, Betsy Vaughn teaching calculus? Oh my God, she could barely pass Algebra 2 in high school. I mean, to me, it is what it is. And I've listened to every single thing you have said. I've listened to what was recommended, but you can only recommend what you have interviewed, who you have interviewed. We did not go outside, did we?
We've been trying to hire planning positions for over 2 years. We have
We need
seen
to do better.
an entirely huge slate of candidates we've hired and lost. I think almost 10 people in that particular
Why?
area.
And we lost a bunch in that department. Why?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. You
All
have
right,
to ask
well,
those candidates. We have done that.
I think I know why. We need to do better. We haven't done better, and I don't want to settle. So that's my final word on the topic.
Ms. Giovanelli, and then Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Gittens, and then Ms. Giovanelli.
Oh, it's okay. The way I look at it, and I've mentioned this before when we're looking at filling a position, if you have a department that has the turnover, that has the issues that we've had in that department, in a corporate world, that would be a sit-down daily discussion for a day and tearing it all apart. And organizational change may be in line. In other words, if we put someone here and that didn't work, and we moved them here and that didn't work, and this is all under the same umbrella of the same department, it may just be time to say, maybe this isn't working because it's not the right fit for anybody. Maybe we need to carve it out differently And, you know, like you were saying, maybe it's 2 positions, one that is from, you know, the outside. And I do know of people that said to me they applied and didn't get an interview that have experience. So I just think from a big picture, corporate perspective, that we need to step back and say, we can't continue just to fill the same buckets. Maybe we need to take a bucket away or add another bucket to it, because for some reason this is not flowing like it should.
Just really appreciate, again, more of that feedback. It's really helpful to hear that there's that concern. Just to reiterate again, this is certainly something that's been an evolving body over the last couple of years. I only know a lot because I've had to be involved with that department. Prior to my role before, I had never really worked with that department other than just to look at the capacity numbers that we were slated for compared to my school budget and whatnot. I will tell you that now, having a much more intimate understanding of how it operates, this is a vital part of our organization that right now is creating a huge threat for our fall enrollment, for our current budget practices, for our current staffing. We're having to outsource with Davis Demographics to ask them to fulfill functions they've never had to do, that we've always been able to rely on internal staff to perform. Without airing all of this in the public meeting, it's just very important to know that we would not be bringing this type of urgent recommendation if we did not feel that operationally, in order for us to carry out our due function every day, that this was not the best fit. Again, from your perspective, I understand you're not in the daily operational concerns that we are, that Frederick is accountable for, that I, as the interim superintendent, will have to answer for come fall, if we have improperly figured out what type of growth concerns we're going to have for enrollment, and then have to deal with those challenges come August. You know, these are the things that really keep me, the budget department, student enrollment, all of us here. So when we bring recommendations, as we have done on this one, I think for more than a month now, we're doing so because we see this operationally in our roles, which again, we have to carry out daily. This is a significant issue to us. It is not the type of thing where I'm bringing this because anything other than that. That is the only reason why, and we've tried to communicate that urgency, but if we failed to do so, then that is on us.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So, first of all, I just want to thank you for identifying that there's a deficiency. And this has been an ongoing one, apparently, and it wasn't addressed by the prior administration, and I believe your hands have been tied during this short interim. So, my apologies for that as well. However, I do agree with Ms. Vaughn and Ms. Gittens that we probably really need to relook at this job description and making sure that we have the right people in the right seats of the bus, because it's affecting us. Like, I'm getting numerous calls where that shouldn't happen when they live, you know, less than 2 miles from the school. So I know there's definitely an emergency, and it's needed. So I will support it. I don't know that this is the perfect answer, but we do have a new superintendent that hopefully this will be on his radar to further look through. I think you're limited at this point, so I understand where we're at today. Thank you.
And I'm thinking too, though, some of the calls that you're probably receiving as well as we all are, is regarding student assignment.
Exactly.
And how they, you know, intertwine together.
Exactly.
Right. That's, yeah, we're all getting those.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Is Ms. Morgan back on the, no, nothing. Ms. Gittens.
If I may, on the comment you just made, when I interned in planning and growth department, it was, I mean, there's such an intertwining of school choice. And I was there working with Dominic. And it was a constant asking Dominic, do we have this? And then school choice would move forward with what they had to do. So, which brings forward, I mean, we'll have Davis Demographics, but are the people that we're hiring able to do those jobs? I mean, I'm a little confused about it, but I just feel like there's specific jobs that have to be done, that we need experts or quasi-experts in the area to do it. And the planning piece that the planning department used to do, that data piece, is critical to us crumbling to the ground. If they gave the wrong numbers at the wrong time, whatever you planned and built was not going to work. So that's a critical piece.
So in what this is saying, so that is, so the Dominic, okay, that person, without using names, is kind of, had the role of coordinator before, correct or not correct?
Yeah.
So when you think about, now I'm thinking, because when you think about that, then we just moved another person into that role, which was that piece that pulled everything, the glue that kept everybody together. And now we're putting it on the top person to be that glue.
Well, that's a pretty good way to frame it. I think I can kind of connect these two thoughts. It helps me. So
Yeah.
basically, the department is accountable for all the work.
Right.
Just like a team, a basketball team. 5 players come together, you have to play defense, share the ball, score buckets, rebound, all those things. That's what the planning department does as a department. The key is, within that department, making sure that everyone has a key contribution of one of the dimensions of that departmental work that has to take place. And how do you pull it all together and make sure that there's a professional diligence and a focus on accuracy? And I think, for me, just to speak about the particular candidate, one of the things I thought was most compelling about this recommendation, and one of the main reasons I was supportive of this, is one of the most detail-oriented, diligent folks that we have, and very thorough in terms of research and so forth. I believe the person had already done this huge body of research about all the pertinent statutes. Those are the kind of things that you just want to leave no stone unturned, because you do currently have in that department experts in all the key areas. They do have that. They actually have people who know a piece of every aspect of the operation has to do, whether it's the actual analysis of the facility. They have a person who just literally mapped all the facilities and done it. They have a person who monitors the daily attendance, the daily student enrollment, so that capacity, the program capacity, and then that residual enrollment that fluctuates throughout every single day. And they have a person in the current person who has all of that understanding of land use, zoning, everything that's pertinent to that. So you already have the pieces. What you're trying to do is pull it together in a way that then can be responsive to the ultimate customer, which are our schools. That's who it impacts. That's who all of the work is for at the end of the day, is to make sure students are served. And so you want that diligence and thorough engagement so that the person is testing.
Bless you.
Bless you. And specifically in the area of data. This is one of the most data-centric processes that we have, and that is currently a threat to our success. And I know there's people out in the audience that are budget. They understand. They've been dealing with this for months now, and it is a critical threat to our system. So it's not just in it's in the staffing and where they're allocated. It's where the resources that go at those schools. I mean, this is unbelievable. Any mistake can be absolutely cost us millions of dollars, have huge burn for us politically with all of our families. I mean, there is so much, and this is just one small example of people, being right next to a school and not being able to get in. That's just a tiny example. There's so many more examples I could do. And so that's when we are bringing these recommendations for. That's why it's so urgent. I would not be passionately trying to help advocate for our executive director other than I've walked in his path. I know what he's up against, and I know what he's responsible for, and we just want to give him the tools to help him pick, which is what we afford to all executives and chiefs. They are typically allowed to hire the people that they recommend, and that's just a normal, because they're ultimately accountable for it. If they make the wrong decision, it impacts them. It impacts their, and I reminded, that was one of the first conversations I've had with each of the folks is, you are accountable. If this is your recommendation, understand you'll pay the penalty if the person screws up in any way, and that is urgent. So I've said my piece. I think I've done what I can.
I'll do this fast.
Yep.
3 things. The board pays the penalty too, because everything on this where the money is wasted, the board. That's number 1. Number 2, what I'm hearing is, and I've criticized the organizational chart several times and asked for revamping, and yet it hasn't really occurred, it almost sounds like this particular position should be more aligned with student enrollment, and I'm not sure how much of this is, you've been talking about the vertical alignment, but we need that horizontal alignment as well. As a matter of fact, I'd almost dare to say more so. And thirdly, it's not like today this name was brought up and all of a sudden we're all saying, or two of us are saying, not qualified for these reasons. You and others knew this going back over a month ago. So all of a sudden, now it's become critical, and I'm sorry that it sounds like it does, but it's the fact that we've delayed this, but in the delay, there has been no remedy. It's just, well, let's just delay it for a while, maybe they'll change their mind or whatever, but you have to be proactive, and when you have a department the way this department has happened, and I'm sorry, this goes to the whole picture, all the people that resigned, the huge mistakes we've made with some of these school, well, we spent a lot of money for a school where the numbers didn't bear out, like in Estero. We should have been more proactive, and I don't care how slim a margin it is. We are a huge school district. Find the people, because we can't afford to not have those people with both sides, or maybe we need to split the position and have somebody with the current candidate's expertise do this and kind of co-manage. That's my final, and you needn't say anymore because I've listened to it 3 times, and I still feel very strongly about this, and it'll be the word of the 7 people on the board. I'm typically in the minority, so I may be in the minority, but I'm not backing down to how I feel about this.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Giovanelli, and then we'll move on.
Yes, and I'm just going to piggyback off that just a little bit, because that was one of my questions I wrote down, is there a plan to hire, more in this department? Because it sounds like this needs to be really reevaluated and addressed, because it has cost us money. We can't sit back and act like it didn't because of the deficiencies. And, I mean, we had a school that was almost being built that wasn't needed, and that's a big deal. So, and then it becomes the board's, the board made that mistake. The board is the one, and we get that constantly. I hear that's board policy, and when there's no such thing as policy, that's coming out of the schools. And then the board said this, and that's not, I got a call this weekend that the board could, if everybody doesn't vote yes to the contract, the board could rescind the bonuses. That's not true. The board never said that. The board's never meant to say that. So that's a big deal, because that's threatening the employees. And that's the last thing that we want to do, the very last thing. We need them. They are the heart and soul of this business or institution, whatever we want to call it, because they're the ones that make it happen. So, Ms. Vaughn brought up a really good point about all the resignations. This really needs a look at, because we can't keep continuing to make these mistakes. And I'll leave it at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Ross, can you just answer that one question that was brought up? Will there be more, is there plans to hire more, yes or no?
So there are currently no other open positions in planning, but I can say this is one part of kind of that piece of bringing all those different pieces of knowledge and skills that are needed in this department, and relooking at, similar to what was done in maintenance, relooking at the org chart and relooking at the different seats on the bus and making sure we kind of have people in the right places. So this is one step in that department's transformation.
I hope we don't have to have this conversation again. That's my hope.
High as well.
Thank you. And so, Dr.
Ready for the next one?
Yes, please.
Thank you,
you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ross. So the next question within that same area was, as indicated previously, I'm sorry. Okay.
Please provide an
Please
update.
provide, yes. Please, sorry, Ms. Gittens, this was your question. Please provide an update of staffing numbers and projections to date for the upcoming year. How are we handling the loss of 8 bus drivers before the end of the year? Again, HR, I can speak for them on this one because Mr. Dodig is not able to today. And he did not have a designee available for this. So the response he did provide was that HR will provide those numbers as requested for the staffing numbers and projections for the up-to-date. There are, as far as the transportation one, there are currently 729 bus operator positions budgeted. That was for this year, 21-22 school year. Currently, of those 729 budgeted positions, they have 626 positions filled presently. The district has 626 positions filled. The district has 32 fewer operators today than it had when we started the year in August. Transportation continues to work with the board, HR, and other community agencies, including the tax collector, Goodwill, et cetera, to recruit potential drivers. We do offer CDL classes every 2 weeks to train and certify new drivers. And they have a whole slew of other additional strategies that they currently employ in terms of existing staff members, trying to get them to, even if they can pick up partial routes and so forth. But to answer the specific question of the 8, the loss of any driver forces them to cover the routes with other buses, which will then force those buses to run even later than they presently do.
And I understand all the initiatives, and I applaud them for all the initiatives they're doing. And I will continue to say what raises the hair on my arms and keeps me up at night is, what is it going to look like in the fall, and how are we going to do this? Because we continue to hear that the shortage may get more. So, I mean, again, it's like we're in crisis mode, I know, but the reason I ask this is to kind of see where we are getting out front of this. I know we're having job fairs, but what is our plan B and C and D if necessary?
And I can't answer all those, but I can tell you the biggest one is change the number of routes that you need. Part of the
Exactly.
reason we talk about proximity and why we brought it up many, many times is exactly that reason, because that's one of the game changers. But there are others. That's one that makes a lot of sense because of how inefficient our current system is, because of our choice system. It's not, I don't want to blame it on transportation. I think it's often easy to say, well, they're.
Oh, they go where you tell them to go.
That's exactly right. 17 different,
That's the issue.
That's it.
And I mean, when I got on the board in 2018, transportation and all was our biggest issue.
Yeah.
And we're in 22 and it's still our biggest issue. So we've got to get the kids there, we know that. But in this, economic environment, are we looking at, and I'm not asking you to explain it, but we need to be looking at options A, B, and at least C to get it done.
We can do better than that. We've got a whole alphabet soup for you. We've got, actually, Mr. Lloyd just recently presented to our business cabinet a whole menu of additional real major constraints that if we were to change any one of them, and just to give you a few examples, things like arterial routing, pulling out of gated communities, just a lot of different pieces that, arterial routing essentially is more working off of, like Hillsborough, for example, is a district that does this, and essentially it's a lot less convenient for the folks who are used to that, I don't want to say door-to-door service, but now it's essentially pulling them towards major roadways, having stops that are located there with more consolidated stops. So more families that would typically, you do a stop here, here, and here, now you're just going to do one stop here, so all of them would have to get to that stop on a major, well-lit, with the sidewalks and infrastructure support it, but it's just a big departure from what we've done here in Lee County.
So my one last question on this is, and you can add this to the data that they can get us later, what is the number of students, because there's a program over here that's not over here, and we are providing transportation for them, where there is a bus going with 1 or 2 students miles and miles every day?
Yep.
So is that a statute or a policy or a law that we if they want to go over here and it's not over here, that we have to let them? Because if it's a law, then we need to look at changing the law.
So that was our Greenbelt project. Interesting enough, there's too many special cases for me to go into all of them, but they vary for the different cases.
That's all I want to know.
Yep,
How many
we are
special
looking at all that.
cases are there?
Yep.
And what is the limit for special cases when it bleeds over into the majority not being able to get to school or do what we need to do because we're dealing with so many special cases?
Well, there are things such as students with disabilities who have to have
Now,
an
that I
attendant on the
understand,
bus.
and I'm not talking about that.
And I'm not saying you
talking
were.
about academic, I want my
Special
child to go
programming.
over here because this program is what's going to get them to college.
And it's blended, it's such a complicated, there's too many layers for me to give you all the answers to that, but I'm just giving examples. Some of the most special programs we offer that are only offered at certain schools are those ESC programs. I mean, there's so many that this is a piece of. There's also students who are homeless that we then have to bus that distance. That's part of the McKinney-Vento Act. And so there's a whole host of these issues. They've looked at different types of vehicles, even things that maybe don't require a CDL license. There's just, it's too exhaustive to go into detail here, but
No,
suffice
and
to say,
I'm not
there's a
asking.
lot to it,
But
and they're
if we
looking
could
at all those
just get the
things.
data as to that breakdown,
Yeah.
that would be very good. Thank you.
Okay, and then Ms. Vaughn, and I just want to remind us, we're coming up to the 1 hour, and we've gotten through the one. So Ms. Vaughn?
Okay, and it was interesting how Ms. Gittens brought up about transportation being an issue. When I ran for school board in 2016, ran unsuccessfully, I still nevertheless checked out everything. And as I went around to the community, and this wasn't like if you're left or right or somewhere in between politically, over and over and over again, I heard people from all political persuasions, the buses. We have buses running, when you have 5 buses stopping on a street, picking up elementary kids to go to 5 different elementary schools. We continue to be, and I know most of this started, Dr. Savage, before you were superintendent, we have been a reactive school district rather than proactive. I thought, were being very proactive a couple years ago when we first engaged Davis Demographics for their piece on proximity plan. We talked about proximity plan when the prior superintendent was here. I know one of the phrases that I said, because and maybe some of you've seen this, I remember my own children back in the days when they were little and we were in Texas, a new school opened and we were kind of midway between. Well, those kinds of things always bring up angst for the parents, but at some point you have to rip off the Band-Aid. We have already talked about grandfathering and said, at some point, if you have a big family, you might be grandfathered into a school for 15 years. Seriously, and what was besides the huge academic benefit of proximity, of ownership of schools, of the feeling more community, besides that, which is so important, transportation. And here we go, and I haven't written my response yet to the board update, but I will be doing a detailed response to that summary that we got. And I'll just say it now, very unhappy with that, with the timeline. You can't have a 4-year timeline because the data changes in that time. And we're talking about being a little over 100 drivers short, and as somebody said, there'll be some that drop out, and there'll be some that we get because hopefully the contract will go through and they'll have raises. But proximity, how much of this could be solved? And it's all well and good that Mr. Lloyd and everybody else They're looking at, we'll do this, do that, but again, reactive, not proactive. I'm very unhappy for two major reasons that we have not moved forward on proximity, and I will have my discussion with you probably, and Dr. Bernier and whoever else, when I have my responses written down. I won't take up the board time, but we're just not planning ahead far enough, I feel.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
I think Ms.
Ms.
Morgan's on.
Morgan, are you with us, or is that Ms. Patrica?
This is Chris Patrica.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Savage? Next one.
All right, the next item, Madam Chair, is L2. This is the approval to reject ITN number N217404JA, exhaust fans repair and replacement. The question was, when do you anticipate this to go back out for rebid, and when will the board see the new contract? And I'm joined by Ms. Susan Millay, our Executive Director in Business Services.
Hello, everyone. Typically, it's a 3-month period of time where we issue and negotiate contracts and bring them back before the board. About 1 month of that time, the bid is typically on the street. So, excuse me, after the board takes action on this, this one will go back and regroup and determine what process improvements we need to make and reevaluate the need and make sure we're looking at all of our options for piggybacking, issuing bids, looking at other bids that have similar work within it.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, thank you.
Is that good? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Millay.
Right.
Dr. Savage?
Yes, so Madam Chair, item L5, this is the approval to renew ITN number N187316LN, which is the cabinet services. The questions where I understand this is a renewal. Normally there is a list of schools for replacement or repairs. What are the anticipated services exactly for this contract? Please provide me with last year's expenditures and schools for the day-to-day repairs. Please explain why only one vendor. And I've got, it looks like Mr. Ross up here today. Mr. Ross?
Yes, thank you. This one is a little changed from previously. So last year, this one for cabinet bids was approximately $3.2 million. And what we've done is we've changed the way we're utilizing this bid. We're going to only utilize it for our day-to-day services that are needed, and we're going to take the individual total school replacements and bid those out individually, giving more competition, hopefully getting a better price. And those bids, once they come in, they will likely be over $50,000, and they will come back to you, to the board for approval. So this is a change in the way we're using this contract to only be for the day-to-day needs of cabinet services. We do have 4 schools that we are targeting to bring forward for the FY23 school year. They are Allen Park Elementary School, Skyline Elementary School, Trafalgar Elementary, and Trafalgar Middle. And again, once those are individually bid out, we would bring those back to the board for approval. This bid does have, this is a renewal, and historically the cabinet bid was a little hard to get vendors to apply for. I actually did this one when I first came here as Director of Procurement, and we had several vendors respond and say they were indicate that they want to, and then a smaller number came out to the pre-bid, and then a smaller number actually submitted, which ended up being that one, I believe. So that is the reason why there's only one vendor on there.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So does that mean that only one vendor will get the jobs then?
In terms of the, so for the day-to-day work that's currently on contract, yes, there's only that one vendor that's on that contract. But when we bid those total school replacement of cabinets out, they will be bid out to multiple vendors. Or the bid will be sent out to multiple vendors to respond. It's our way of trying to get more competition on those total school replacements that have more dollar value.
So, I mean, and I'm trying to refresh my memory on this. The last year we listed the schools that had.
Correct.
That's what I thought. That's what made me question this, because I thought it was different.
Correct. So those schools aren't listed, and also that dollar amount is much lower because those total school replacements aren't on there.
Okay, thank you.
No, and you'll be bidding every single one.
It will be bidding those out, and that is our intent is to get more competition in this area. Yep.
That's good. Are there any other questions
Those are all the
regarding?
questions.
No? Okay. Dr. Savage, that's all your
Those
questions?
are all the questions.
Back up.
Yes, we did.
Next, we have, and thank you for your questions. We have capital strategy is next. And hi, ladies. And do you want to come up here? You feel? Yeah, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. How is everyone?
Good, how are you guys?
Hi, Ashley. Hi, Carolyn.
Glad you get to hear about all the updates.
What update? Stuff happened? Something happened?
What they're gonna tell us?
We have so much great news. Academy Awards when whatever.
Why are we laughing at you,
sat
Ashley?
out and said, did anything happen while I was gone? No. Glad to be with you today. Thank you for the
We are as well.
invitation
Thank you.
to be here. Session is over for now. I think there's gonna be
Regular sessions
The
over
regular
for now.
session is over. The special session was
C
interesting.
is over.
And there'll be another one though in May. So I think they're gonna bring up the property tax issue.
Insurance,
Yeah, the insurance,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I said property tax.
Yeah,
pro-
insurance.
Insurance.
which we need.
Which we need, and that's gonna come up, and so we'll get another one too, another bite at the apple, if you will. But it was a tough session, you know, every session takes on its own form. Every one I've been at has, and this one was one that did likewise, and we were glad when it ended. There were a lot of bills filed. There's always a lot of bills filed. I mean, that's normal to see a lot of bills filed. And then you note that you've already received your final report about the number of bills that actually were passed. And they're still in the process of being evaluated. Budget still has not been signed. We know that the budget was not going to be signed. The governor said he would not sign it until we got through this last special session, which was very important to him. And so consequently, right now, he still has time, so we don't know. I mean, we know he
has a lot of time.
Yeah, he has a lot of time, exactly. So that's still hanging out there, and there are some bills that are still hanging out there. But that being said, I will also just comment one thing, and I know Ashley's going to share with you some of her thoughts in regards to the reports that you have received. And that is that education gets a lot of bills filed every year, and I don't have the percentage right now off the top of my head. I actually was looking for that note off my desk before I came here, and I unfortunately couldn't put my hand on it. But there's a big percentage of bills that are filed that really do impact education. And many years ago, when I first got in the legislature, I remember my first term, and everybody talks about, well, you know, we come there to the legislature as individuals who have careers. Well, some do have careers where they have a specialty that they can come, and special information that they can come and bring to the table of things that they're interested in or things that they do. The thing that's interesting to each and every individual is every one of them has opinions about education because every one of them's been to school. So they think that they have, or maybe they do in some terms, have a lot of information. So consequently, they have a lot of things that they feel that they can fix because they know something about that subject matter.
Or they had a child that's in school.
That too.
Or a grandchild.
That too. Or they're still in school.
Yes,
Which has happened too.
which has happened, yes.
So consequently, we do see an inordinate amount of interest, and this year was no exception to that, as you each and every one know. There were the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know Ms. Vaughn and I have had this conversation a little bit at a chamber meeting recently. Anyway, you all have received the reports that Ashley puts out for you every week, and then, of course, the final report. And any questions that you've had, you kind of brought up along the way, or we've certainly had some phone calls from folks along the way. But with that being said, Ashley and I would like to share some thoughts with you. I think she has some thoughts too, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
I was just gonna go through, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 bills to me that really stood out that have such an impact. And on the plus side, I'll start with the good news, is one of your priorities, which was 236, the children with developmental delays, increasing that age from 5 to 9 or second grade, whichever comes first. So that was a priority of the boards, and that did get passed. And I want to say it got signed into law, but let me double check that. I'll check that and then email you guys. So
I thought you said it did.
I think it did, but like my brain gets foggy around this
There's
time of
so
year.
much in it.
Yes, so I'm pretty sure it did, but there were some delays with bills because of, because I know 7 just got signed into law that I'm going to talk about
But there was
next.
no controversy.
There was no
with that bill.
controversy, so
So
it'll
went
be.
right through.
Yeah, I don't even think it had a negative vote, a negative
Right.
word, a negative anything. So that was the good news. Not that these are bad news, but we had several controversial bills, and I'll start with 7. I'm gonna go in order, numerological order. And that was the individual freedoms bill, the anti-critical race theory bill. And that had a lot of debate, as you well know, and that was just signed into law, I wanna say this week.
It's just recent.
Recent, yes, okay.
It's numbers as your,
Oh, 7, number 7. And that goes into the curriculum with students, talking about history, talking about, in particular, the history of African Americans, and the way that teachers are allowed to broach those topics and what they can say and what they shouldn't be saying. And I'm sure there's questions about this, so feel free to jump in. But that was, again, a really controversial bill that I believe had some protests on it, right?
It did. It had quite a few, actually. Yeah, that was Representative Arvila's real big push, and it was really pushed from the House. The House did all of the push on it because they really didn't have a companion even in the Senate until later in the process, and then that's when that got picked up by the Senate.
And yeah, the Senate just picked up their bill.
They just picked up, 7.
And quite a lot of senators were upset about that because
They
it
were.
didn't go through their proper channels on the Senate side. But that's what happens when we have legislation that is preferred by leadership. It kinda
So they just
goes
kept
through.
the,
House language.
the
There
la-
was no
the
Senate
language.
bill.
Okay,
Yeah, they
yeah.
just took it, they heard it in what, rules?
Yes, they heard it.
Yeah, they picked it up in rules.
That happened several times this year with.
It happened last year, too.
Yeah, with legislation.
That's kind of, it seems to be the new trend, is that once a bill on either chamber passes, whether it's a House or a Senate priority, and it passes through that chamber, what's been happening in the Senate is, particularly with House bills, they'll just take up the House bill. What used to happen is, they would have their own bill, they would pass out their own bill, and whatever got to the end first, once it got through the chambers, they would say that it already passed the House, then they would pick it up on the chamber floor and put their bill, lay their bill down that's been debated, and then pick up the House bill. They haven't been doing that. They've just been basically taking the House's legislation and debating that bill without their own legislation that's been vetted through all of their committees.
and it's easier too, because they don't have to create their own verbiage and then debate both of that, so
Right,
it's
they-
already there, they just move it forward.
Correct.
So the debate becomes the process.
Right.
Yes.
Which takes away from the debate on the bill.
right.
And then public's not able to talk to individual senators that are on the committee prior to, because they haven't had a chance to do that. So they're trying to get their points out in the middle of a committee meeting, the first time the Senate's ever picked up or heard the bill. That happened last year, as I think the first time I've seen that in
That
a
was the first
while.
time I'd seen that, too.
And then it happened this year too.
Yeah.
So they kind of just pushed that bill through.
And before we
Yep, you
go
can
to
jump in.
another bill, I just checked while we were talking, and 235, the bill that we were just talking about, has been signed by the governor.
236.
230,
I thought it was 6. I have 6.
She said 6.
Because it should be an even
Okay.
number
Well,
because it's
235's been
Jones.
signed too, just so you.
Okay, we got that down
Now
too.
I'll find out about the other one, so,
Because
sorry.
it was Jones's bill, so it should be an even number.
That's right.
Okay,
Can I ask
Yes, ma'am.
on that
yep,
last bill, there are a lot of words that are, what's the word for them, undetermined or whatever it can be, your perception of what the word means. You say fair to me, and I've got a bag of money. It's fair for me to have that bag of money, and if you're over there hungry and poor, fair to you is that you don't have anything to eat.
Right.
So there are so many words in there that are objective, is it objective, subjective. I always mix them up. Subjective. Was that even discussed or considered on the floor when they were debating?
Or is that intentional?
It's intentional in the writing.
No, I know it is, but was it not?
Debated by other, hotly debated, actually, in the House. By I'm pretty sure every Democrat got up and spoke against House Bill 7.
Well, you talk about must feel guilt. I mean, I just, anyway, I'm not getting into the details, but I thought overarchingly there are a plethora of words that are very subjective.
Yes.
And we leave that to our legal community.
Because I was going to say, be prepared, because this is definitely going to be litigated.
Yes.
So that's where it's going to land. Yes.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I have a question.
Pertaining to HB 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Any thoughts about how this is going to be monitored? And
TikTok video.
because
That's a good one, yeah.
we have professional development throughout the year, but when a new school year starts, there's a lot of professional development, and some of these things are things that we likely have coursework on, that we give presentations on, that we help especially new teachers deal with some of these issues. So what are your thoughts on how this will be monitored? And, I mean, is this going to be something that you have a teacher or some other staff member that disagrees, that videotapes something and sends it to DeSantis? Or, I mean, how is this going to fly?
As far as the materials go, there is language in the bill that Department of Education, they have to come up with a curriculum, stories of inspiration. So that's, I know, it's in quotes. I'm not quoting, I mean, stories of inspiration curriculum that they have to develop. So to your point about the material, the Board of Education, State Board of Education, sorry, that they're required to come up with that curriculum. So to your question about the materials and teaching teachers what they can say and can't say, that is, I guess they're looking at curriculum for that now. But as far as the monitoring, I don't think you can, and I do think there's going to be incidences where there's videotaping. I mean, I'm kind of joking about the TikTok thing, but I'm not.
No,
I mean,
it's not a
I can see
joke.
a high school student videotaping, making a TikTok, and posting it on social media. So I don't think you can.
And that's why
you can't regulate everything that happens in the class, in every single classroom, on every single day of the school year.
But look at what happened to Disney because they expressed their First Amendment rights. But, I mean, what I foresee in this are two things. Number one, again, training. How do we train? What do we do if we go over the line in the training? And I can see that we will. I mean, so much of this is not educationally sound. And secondly, what will they do? Will they take away funding? Will they, I mean,
Probably.
how does this work?
Well, and also, let's not forget this, as we go through these bills, is this is going to be a problem with the 1557. With the Don't Say Gay bill.
Right. Well, let's take them.
That's also going to be a big problem.
Let's take them both together. Do you have thoughts? Have you heard people say, or maybe Mr. Free Bruno has something? I mean, if they put this in writing, you know they're going to be out there monitoring.
Of course.
And you know that they are going to be flying into probably the schools that are already on their radar that tick them off about masks. They might be the first ones, but that's what concerns me. And I think we need to know this ahead of time. What are they going to do? How are they going to do this?
This is definitely a brand-new area that's untested at this point. So we know that there's going to be tests of these different laws. There's already a case on 1557 that's already pending. So we're going to have to monitor from a legal standpoint what's going on in the legal landscape. We also know that this is going to be a ripe new area of the law for attorneys who are representing parents to be able to test these waters. So the only thing we can do is to be as proactive as possible, make sure that staff is completely informed and understand these new legislative changes, that we have our processes in place to minimize the risk as much as possible. And then in June, we'll be going to the School Board Attorneys Conference where there'll be more discussion to see what our colleagues in our think tank of attorneys are thinking on how this is all gonna play out. Because it's gonna be impactful. I'm gonna tell you, it's going to be extremely impactful, and we are monitoring that legal landscape and trying to prepare as best we can for this district to be insulated.
And there are more pieces to the puzzle that will be falling into place there too. This is a bill that passed and was signed, and after that, that's the framework. There's other pieces that are going to be put in there, to your point, that it's all, and here's another interesting thought about this in bringing up what you're talking about. There was a bill filed this year that actually never did even get a hearing, which got all of our interest, and that was the one about putting video cameras in every school.
Oh, jeez.
And that didn't get a hearing, and it didn't get filed in the Senate, but it got filed in the House. And it didn't get a hearing, it died. But there are people who are very interested in doing that. Of putting an actual camera in every classroom.
Well, there's, what's Representative Fine, he calls
Absolutely.
Our public schools state-run schools.
Yeah, our government schools.
Government, that's right, government or state or government-run schools, not public schools.
There are those who feel that would be appropriate.
Every meeting, that's what he says. Every single meeting, that's what he says about public schools.
And he's also the one that had the punitive measure that he put in regards to the mask issue.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, same
We were there.
person.
We were there.
Same person.
And I know Ms. Fisher has a.
No.
236 did get signed too.
Okay.
So, yes.
236 and 235.
And they're both good bills and they both got signed. Okay.
Just
And
wanted.
that was unanimous vote, so that was a.
Yeah,
that
it was
the
agreed. It's a
unanimous
good
vote.
bill.
Yeah.
You can't argue against
Absolutely.
that bill.
They both were unanimous votes.
Just wanted to put a plug in to support what Kathy was saying as well. One of the helpful defenses is by being part of the Neola network as well. You'll have policies that on their face are responsive to these issues, and they have the strength of numbers that other districts, that becomes a standard practice. But then it's on us to make sure we have the processes, which again are part of that package of Neola, that show this is how it's being implemented. So all these things are helpful, not just in general, but especially when the legislation brings new challenges every year. All the districts that are part of that network have to face it too.
Well, but also what Ms. Vaughn had mentioned, how do you train them? So this is a bill, once it's signed in, and then the stories, so we have to wait for them to come up with the stories for us.
Inspiration curriculum?
Yes,
Right.
when do the stories come out for inspiration? What does that look like? How do you train them to have the curriculum for the
Is it
inspiration?
out there? I don't know. I mean, does it even exist?
Yeah, we have no idea. So how do we get our teachers ready for the upcoming year even?
Right, so this is a lot of discussions with academic services and discussions with legal and academic services to be prepared. And the only other thing I would add really quickly before Ms. Fisher is with regards to the videotaping. At this point, I think staff in the district just need to assume that you're always on camera.
Right.
Because we're getting cases all the time where students are videotaping teachers and sharing, and This is something that our HR attorney, Mr. Hudak, has to deal with in terms of where does the privacy interest begin for the teacher?
Right.
What's going on in the classroom? Is this going to be admissible? I mean, these are major legal issues that we're going to have to face. There's going to be an avalanche of legal issues that are coming our way, for sure.
Yeah. Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, and along those lines, I was going to say, how does the passage of these different bills into laws and being signed by the governor, first of all, impact our response to other laws, to federal law and that? How about First Amendment rights with the CRT thing? I mean, it's almost an impossible situation. And I think an avalanche is even going to be a calm word for an understatement for what might happen.
I would just say to Ms. Fisher's point, it's not just federal law. There's state law in our regular education code that we have some different language that it's going to be challenged by some of these new laws. So this is going to be impactful across the board, not just from federal standpoint with our civil rights cases and our laws and our titles and our codes from federal standpoint, but also just in the education code itself, which has some language that needs to be identified.
So,
Go ahead, Ms.
yeah, so I'll ask Carol and Ashley then, with all of the issues in this state, was there any discussion about some of those environmental issues, homelessness and housing and infrastructure and stuff, while we're focusing on CRT, LGBTQ, and...
No, the answer's no.
Really?
Well, there are people who do bring those issues up, but I'll give you a perfect example of something that I think all of us found impactful as we watched the Surfside, the condo building that's been collapsed. Yeah, and having lived in a high-rise for several years here in this area that was 40 years old, it got my attention. I don't live in that high-rise anymore either, but that, unfortunately, there was absolutely nothing passed that had any, and there were bills filed, but they didn't pass as far as any structural or any type of changes that needed to be made to our high-rises that are on the coast that are eroded by the sea salt and sea water, sea air and the salt water. So when you see that happen and realize how much of an impact that did have on our state.
And our home insurance.
And our home insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge.
And that
They
wasn't
blitzed
touched,
that.
that goes back to that big old debate about the trial bar versus, because that's where that one's really hung up. In my opinion, anyway. I know you're impacted by it, even
With our
directly.
roof, yeah.
Directly. So
My roof.
yes, there are times when people do discuss those things, and they discuss those things during debate with some of this stuff too, and go, why can't we discuss these things? But unfortunately, some of those things have been left to the wayside, and these others have been taken forward because, for instance, Representative Avila, who is a really wonderful man. I mean, he's got a great story to tell about his family personally and what happened to them when they immigrated here to Florida. So I hear what his story is, and I say, wow, what a story that, talk about stories. He's got
inspiration.
one. And very inspirational. And so I can't fault him because he was bringing forward something he believes very strongly in. He has great passion for this. This wasn't a gotcha. This wasn't any of that. This was something that he felt very strongly about. So if we had a champion that came forward, for instance, on homelessness or on those types of things, and you and I've had this conversation too, Ms. Fisher, about you need a champion. You know, when it came to health education, had to have a champion. Finally got a champion who was willing to do that. So that's my take on it. You have to have a champion.
Go ahead, Ms. Gittens.
My question is, it says if approved by the governor, it will take effect July 1, 22.
Exactly.
So is there a statute of limitations for implementation? Because, or are they up there now busily writing the inspirational stories?
My guess is they are.
You mind?
They don't want this to fail because we
But
have
I mean-
a Republican
But I mean,
on
in other
House,
words,
Senate, and governor, and it's an election year.
But when we start school again, if they have the stories written, when is there time to train and to implement? And because if they're going to be saying July 1, this has to be in place, well, what? Well, we just got it. So,
It always, and there's always lag time. Anytime you have a bill that passed, I mean, whether it's health, whatever it is, there's
I mean,
always
it's signed
lag
into law, but
time.
that doesn't mean they have to, I don't think it has the implementation deadline.
I don't see
I mean,
that.
I can look into that further, but I mean, it's signed into law, but
It gets handed over to people who are very smart, who will put all these packages together. And I would hope that these stories of inspiration would be put, I mean, with the electronic pieces that we have and all of the things, it would be a film, it would be a FaceTime, I don't know,
Right.
what's the word I want, a video.
I have one last question on that, because someone asked me this the other day, with all of these changes in curriculum, and for example, with the math books, and the math books that we have to change, do we pay for that? Because if we've budgeted for this particular book and it's a different book that comes out, who pays for?
We do.
Yeah,
really? Assume the district.
yeah, the districts are gonna pay for it.
I know. But I mean, again, it would be funding that we receive for that, but if it's, you know, if this year is supposed to be math books, and then next year we have to do math books because there's major changes, and next year was supposed to be history books, we get a backlog, and we get a financial, so will they become categoricals, or will we get funding for that, or?
I think those are all great questions. I don't think that anybody that's sitting here right this second has the answer to all of those questions, but they are very good questions.
Well,
and they
Representative
will-
Fine thinks school districts get plenty of money.
Yes, he does.
He said that many times.
Many times. Many times. Yes.
Can you repeat that, Ashley?
Representative Fine, the chair of the House Pre-K through 12 Education Appropriates.
I think he's Broward, right?
Yes, he has said many times that the school districts gets plenty of money.
A Brevard.
Or Brevard, I know it's one of the Bs.
Yeah, Brevard. He has, but, you know, he has a battle going on with his school board.
He does.
His local school board.
He has an old.
There's a
big.
there's a lot more to that story, because he's got a battle going on, a personal battle going on there with his school board, with one school board member in particular. He has a child in public school. So again, back to what we were talking about just a little bit earlier. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a background, and everybody brings that background to the table. Mr. Arvelia brought that background of a courageous story, and he made it into this.
Right.
Representative Fine has his story that he lives every day of his life, and he's turning it into what's important to him.
Major motion picture.
Yeah. It's a star, but, yeah.
I know, you guys.
Sorry, yeah.
We'll walk you out tonight.
You have something on this?
The only thing I would add is, you know, we're talking about the inspirational stories, but let's not lose sight of the vastness of this bill.
Yes.
Because you know, we're talking about education as well as labor and employment.
Yes.
And training, and diversity training, equity training. This is all part of this discussion. So we'll be breaking it down, and we'll have some additional discussions, but this is a vast bill.
Actually, the stories are probably the best part of the bill, in a lot of ways. No, really.
I know, really.
In a lot of ways, because I think those are things that are,
We should
here's
be
my
learning
personal
that. They should
feeling
be
about
learning
it.
about that.
We should, yeah, we want people
people's stories.
to hear about courageous stories.
But
Ron
Are we
DeSantis
able-
story.
Are we able to say the words diversity and equity anymore, and, you know, in regards to this, because, or is it saying that, no, you should not use those terms?
doesn't specifically say that.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
We have to tread cautiously, let's put it that way.
right, okay.
Ms. Patrica, did you have something to add?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so are we also discussing 1557 at the same time?
Well, it's
it's
on my
next,
list.
it's next on the list.
Next
I
on,
mean, it's coming.
okay, not yet. Ashley will be bringing that up in a moment.
Okay, that's where my question lies.
Okay, we'll call on you then. Go ahead, Ash.
Okay, the next bill of significance is 497, the one where we're going to elect our superintendent.
Oh, brother,
Any comment on that?
we're in big trouble.
I mean, that also passed with flying colors.
Are there other,
But why did it pass with flying colors?
other districts that are, how is the temperature for this out in other districts?
I don't know about the other districts, but there were other members that talked against it, including Representative Smith. There were other members that were concerned that this particular bill was going to trickle into their school districts, and they would also be affected by this. But Representative Persons Millica and Representatives Roach were very adamant that this is just a local bill and has no effect, and that everybody should be in favor of it because the entire legislative delegation was in favor of it.
And that's correct. But I will tell you that there was no debate in the Senate. The Senate essentially,
Oh, yeah, they did their docket
and it was just passed.
Yeah, where they do all their local bills, as long as it isn't, what is the word I'm looking for?
As long as somebody doesn't pull it.
Pull it. So it's just like your consent agenda. It's basically a consent agenda in the Senate. So if no one pulls a bill off, they just pass the whole thing, and that's how it passed in the Senate.
And it came to the Senate as a bill that was sponsored by Senator Pasadomo and Senator Rodriguez. So
I mean, 21 Democrats voted against it
in the House. In the House there was debate.
There was.
In the House, all by Democratic members. And there were 21 of them that voted against it. How did it pass? Why did it pass? Just for
the push that it was local.
The push that it was local. It's a local bill. And it is a local bill.
Okay.
And that's not a lie. I mean, that's a bad word. That's not a misspoken mistruth. It is. It's specifically drawn to Lee County.
Lee County, yeah.
Right, so it is a local bill, and so for our local members who felt very strongly about it, when anybody would debate against it, they would be reminded, this is a local bill.
But it is a precedent.
Well,
Yes.
It's a regression, in my opinion,
Well,
but.
and that, therein is what will need to be discussed as you go forward. As a board, as individuals, that's where you get an opportunity to have your side heard.
Right.
Because it's going on referendum.
Because it's going on referendum.
The general election.
And that was another reason it passed.
Educating the community.
Is the referendum piece.
The referendum piece helped it pass. If it had been, we're changing this, but because it's a referendum, they're saying the local people get to make the determination. Again, that's a truism. I mean, the local people do get to make that decision. So that's where the education, if you will, the education of the electorate becomes a very important issue for individuals.
But truthfully, there's a lot of people that do not know the difference of appointed and elected. So they think it's one and the same.
And that's why
they
we
don't
have
understand
to
that we
write
have to,
letters to the editor.
yes, educate.
And get on
That's the
TV
educational
and
piece that you all will,
people,
you know,
yeah,
take part in.
Correct.
hopefully.
Did it bring any other districts to thinking about, oh, maybe we should do this?
Not that I've heard of. I haven't heard anybody that's made that comment.
Yeah, and at the school board association, they're not excited about this either.
Well, no.
In conversation.
And you look at where we are in history and how many people have elected superintendents, mostly in Florida and Georgia.
Alabama.
Alabama.
Yeah, they're the only two.
And so it's frightening. It really is. So we do have a lot of work to do in educating our community.
It's an educational challenge, yes.
The next bill that we should probably talk about is 1048, and that was the,
Wait, I'm sorry, Ms. Patrica, did you have something to say on that one?
I did, yes. To sort of piggyback off what Ms. Fisher just said, it really is the opposite of progress. And I really can't talk about this one without talking about the school board term limits.
Yeah, that's coming up, yep.
You know, what the public didn't hear, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What the public didn't hear with regard to the term limits is that term limits don't really apply to our legislators because many of them go for, go until they're termed out in the House, and then they switch over to the Senate, and they go until they're termed out in the Senate, and then they recycle into a local elected position such as county commissioner or property appraiser or any of those. So what we have is we have legislators in seats where there's no real specialization, and when people try to serve on school boards for a long period of time, there's a sort of a rejection of that specialization and knowledge by implement. Part of what we need to think about here is this is yet another opportunity for legislators to recycle into a local elected position. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. She's just saying that they just keep on going from the next seat to the next seat to the next seat.
Career politicians.
They just
I think what
just
she was
jump
saying.
from the next one over.
Oh, okay.
And now this is just another opportunity for them to get into a
Exactly.
local position
And then
when
come
they're
back.
done with the state, is how I.
So was there any discussion about, excuse me?
What?
Go ahead.
Okay. Was there any discussion about what the impact would be on school boards if we had an elected superintendent? I mean, because what would be the purpose of a local school board in Lee County if we have an elected
was my question.
superintendent?
That was our question.
I can answer that. So school boards have all of the same duties that you actually have, you still would have. So more than half the districts in Florida actually do have an elected superintendent, and their boards they still carry out the exact same functions. The only distinction between ones that have elected versus appointed are the school board makes a determination over whether to hire and fire the superintendent in that appointed position, whereas in elected, it's the electorate that does it. And that's the only distinction. The rest of it is passing the budget, same personnel, and all the things you currently do, those are those things. The only difference is that one piece.
But what you also are missing out is what does that district look like compared to this district?
yeah.
The size of the district and Bill and
Pasco.
Bob knowing.
You're right. Pasco is probably the best comparison in terms of size.
Is not as good. The achievement is not as good in the elected superintendent districts.
Well, and,
Ms. Street? Did you have some?
I do. So
Then I'll come back to Ms. Gaines.
I agree 100% with Dr. Savage. So this will not change the statutory obligations of both the superintendent and the board. Basically, everyone will still have the same responsibility as required in the statute. What does change is that the elected superintendent does have a political office, which does create a difference in terms of boundaries, excuse me, and how you work with the school board. So in some of the smaller districts, and speaking to their school board attorneys, I know that some of them have been very successful. Some of these superintendents have been there for a long time. But I also know that there's been some concerns in terms of how will the elected superintendent in their own constitutional office be able to work and deal with an elected school board in their constitutional office, with both of you having a fiduciary duty to the public. So it becomes a little bit more political. So it's more practical things that I think will change versus the statutory responsibilities.
Ms. Gittens?
well, as I'm reading the first paragraph, and it says clearly, the superintendent serves as the secretary and executive officer of the school district, responsible for general oversight, which I kind of disagree with what you're saying. In other words, we were always told our job is oversight. It's not to do this, it's oversight, and it is going to...
So, the superintendent is the chief executive officer who's responsible for the day-to-day management and operations, the oversight of the school district from a day-to-day standpoint, whereas the board is responsible for governance and policy. And again, the statute is very clear in terms of who does what, even though there's a lot of gray and a lot of overlap in the statute. Does it make sense, Ms. Gittens?
I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I see it being a real controversy in that it states also that the superintendent reports to the Board of Education. And so if there is something that the board, whoever that is, you know, has questions about, well, you know, talk to the state. Because
Definitely.
I don't have to listen.
Definitely.
And to me, it's like Ms. Fisher says, it makes the board literally, you know, lame duck.
Definitely giving direction to the superintendent to do certain tasks, and if the superintendent decides not to, it's going to make the board, and it's going to put the board in a very difficult situation, because
exactly.
the only person that can remove an elected official is the governor.
Is the governor, and I just, honestly, I just see the position of the board being diminished, you know, a whole lot.
But not only that, too, because I look at it, and somebody actually was speaking on this the other day, how somebody who was the superintendent, elected, was asking for donations from every single employee, $50 from each employee to keep their position, as well as where do you want your child to go to, bless you, where do you want your child to go to school at? And because it becomes a...
it's political.
Everything's political. It's a political fundraiser. Continuous.
Right.
So, Dr. Savage?
I just wanted to respond, bless you. One thing,
No more.
so every time the board takes action and votes, those types of things still occur. So you know, the only reason I know, I had never met elected superintendent until I went to Tallahassee, had a chance to meet there, and then a number of elected superintendents when I worked in Tallahassee. Then additionally, Pasco County Superintendent, who's the largest elected superintendent in the country, Kurt Browning. So I had the chance to talk to him as well. So one of the things that they explained, because I was just curious when I was in Tallahassee, how does that even work? You know, because I was not familiar with that other than in my graduate courses. What they said is essentially you're trying to earn their support because the board still has to vote. So, for example, if it's a 7-member board and you don't get 4 votes on particular items, you're stuck. And so they don't, just because the board can't hire or fire them, does not mean that the board in any way is limited in their purview in terms of adopting all the things that you will vote on tomorrow night and all the things you vote on any given board meeting. Those votes still have to carry, and that's just the nature of it. So I'm just, from my strange vantage point that I've had to work across it, I just wanted to contribute to your questions.
Ms. Jordan, Ms. Vaughn.
Sorry, Ms. Vaughn. Please. Thank you.
I'm wondering if the language of this for Lee County is very close to the language from other counties. Is there something that's kind of standardized and you just plug in your county? Do you happen to know?
I have no idea.
Isn't this the same language that they had when they switched it over? Or am I mistaken? Back from 19, whatever that year was.
Well, yeah, it's
Just
referenced.
reverse the.
Okay, but
use that.
But
in terms of,
But you're talking about a cookie cutter type
well,
thing across
for the state, I mean,
Not that I am aware of. I
Okay.
don't see that there's any huge movement out there to go one way or the other. I think this was something that came up during conversations that the representative had with other folks.
okay, and I guess kind of a legal question. This doesn't have any specific qualifications here. I know at least some, like the U.S. Congress presidency has certain age and that sort of thing. So technically, somebody 18 years old could be running for this. That was my other question, because we've already talked about the lack of any kind of language on qualifications. It makes me wonder if some of the other counties in this state have that in theirs. And anyway, that's why I'm asking if any of them have specifications on this office.
Ms. Giovanelli, I know you had a question. Did you have your hand up, or was that just?
Well, I was just looking at the Pasco County. He apparently was the Pasco County Supervisor of Elections for 27 years prior to being the superintendent.
Yeah, he didn't
So
just walk over.
I guess there's no term limits on superintendents.
Right.
Oh, is there? That's not in there?
No.
I'm
Well,
reading the actual bill.
There wasn't on
It's
school
only 3
board
pages.
members either until
Until-
this year.
right.
So that, there, I mean, that, there are certain elected positions like that. Yes, he replaced Representative, former Representative Heather Fiorentino was the superintendent. They had a really contentious race between the two of them. And the only reason I know about that is because then Representative Fiorentino and I served together, and she ran for the seat and held that seat for a while. But, you know, there was controversies that came up, as happens, and then he decided that he was going to run against her, and they had a battle, but he won.
I heard he's very well liked, though.
Oh, yes, he is, absolutely. He's another one that's
Recycling.
been around for a while.
Yeah, so he,
But he is well respected. I mean,
yeah.
but
Mr. Preborn, did you have anything else? to add
Just
to that?
to answer Ms. Vaughn's question in terms of qualifications and necessities to run for the office, that's governed by Article 6, Section 4 of the Florida Constitution, which is very limited for anybody who's running for office in the state of Florida. Basically, that the person cannot have been convicted of a felony or be adjudicated mentally incompetent, and in the case of the superintendent, that he lives in the
There's a silver lining.
and lives in the
You
district.
have to live in the district.
So that's pretty much it. And then,
there's no
So they
age.
could be 18.
But
Yes,
it
they
could be 18, could be,
Yep. There's no
Is
age.
it
and
one
we
of the
couldn't
80?
add qualifications because this is by the Florida State Constitution.
Right.
So we can't add
Kind of a
things.
big document.
okay,
That's
so,
very
and is
difficult
it-
to amend.
But
So to
is it
finish
that
up-
they have to be there once they win type of thing? Do they have to live in that area?
They're supposed to live in the area that they're running
No,
for.
but some positions,
no, they have to
you
live
can
in the
run,
district.
and then if you win, you have to move
Congress
there.
is that way.
Not for this one.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
okay, so there is no, to finish up what I'm saying, probably most of the other counties have similar kinds of language. The only possibility was to add term limits, or is that by statute?
Nothing can be added or
No,
removed
okay.
unless it goes to the legislative branch.
So there is no term limits, and they do not
There's
know
no-
at this time if this follows anybody else's, correct?
Okay, all right.
Absolutely correct.
Got
Okay.
it.
I know, Ashley, you have a lot more to go.
Oh, no, I have like 3 more. I just have to leave in 20 minutes
Yep,
because
you're
I
good,
actually have students I have to pick up.
You're good.
Your kids, they're real kids.
They're real kids, trust me.
Are they old enough to run for superintendent?
Well, I have one that's gonna be 14. In 4 years, he could. We'll just move him right into Benita and he can run. No problem. 1048 is the bill that changes the.
I'm sorry, which one, what was that?
FSA.
10?
1048. So what this bill does is it changes our FSAs and makes them, they call them, where's that term? Coordinated screening and progress monitoring tools. So instead of doing the big end of the year FSAs for ELA and math in grades 3, actually the ELA is grades 3 through 10th, and the math 3 through 8th grade, they will do 3 smaller tests throughout the year. So they're calling them benchmarks.
Right.
And the last test, the third test, the end of the year test, is what they're going to use as far as grading the schools and their scorings, like for the children, you know, if they get a 1 through a 5, and then this is my end of the year. So it's the last test is the one that's going to be used for high school graduation, 3rd grade retention, school grades, and school improvement ratings.
Nothing's really gone away.
There are people who would argue that that's
There,
correct.
yes.
Yes.
So, I mean, I live and breathe the FSAs because I have 4 children. Only 3, my youngest doesn't take it yet. So The way I look at it is, they're just doing smaller bits of that throughout the year. Instead of doing
Spreading it
2
out.
days of testing like they do now, they're going to break it up, is
Spread
how
it
I look at it.
And that's
probably gonna
why
be
a lot of the
more. Yeah, spread it
educators
out.
are concerned that it's actually more testing,
More, yeah.
And that's part of the argument that we heard during the debate.
Right.
which
No
died
doubt
because
about it.
Which died.
It hasn't
I just
really
want to know
changed.
what testing company is doing it. Like,
Well, yep.
you know what I mean?
And if you,
Yep.
and if you
That's more
Google,
money.
and if you
I know what
Google
you
them,
do it.
You know, I mean.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, and interesting enough,
all their boards
Diaz
are
is
the
the
same
one
numbers.
that did the 1048. I hear he's the one that they're gonna put in
They are.
replace Corcoran.
They are, they just announced that, but yeah, we had heard that rumor, and
it's a
they just
done deal.
announced that.
Ah, so we're gonna,
So they are giving a year transition, so the changes start for not, is it 2000, I think.
23,
Yes.
24. There's
Yes.
a year
And
transition.
then so that first testing year, they're not using those scores for school grades. That'll be
There's a
a
year
transition year,
of grace.
a grace period, yeah.
And I said that that's a done deal in regard to Manny Diaz. It's a done deal as far as the appointment goes. He still has
to go through
get
the
vote
Senate.
and go through, but
process.
that will
Yeah.
happen. He's a senator.
Yeah.
He's a sitting senator. The chances
It's-
of him not being put in that position
Is
are not
extremely low.
there.
Exactly.
Unless something, I mean, things happen, but I don't expect that.
Can I ask on 758, that was Diaz as well, about visiting schools? Is there something now that legislators
Which bill, Ms.
cannot,
Gibbons?
it's 758 on education, and it's,
This was for charter schools, though, because I think you can't any legislator visit school? And I
Yes.
think this was drawing in
And
charter
any citizen
schools.
visit any school?
okay.
And Mr.
in his chart.
That's why I didn't really bring up this bill, because
Okay.
it was a lot of charter school stuff,
Yeah.
like the Charter School Review Commission, and he's really into charter schools.
Very
He's a
much
big
so.
charter school guy.
But the one thing that's
Oh,
important-
huge.
Yeah, very much so, but he's a former teacher, a former principal, he's come up through the ranks. So that is something to realize, that he knows what he's talking about. He's walked the walk. He has a certain
He does know his stuff.
strategy, and that strategy is more charter, but at the same time, yeah, he's an educator.
He does know the statutes.
So was there any discussion about funding and the difference in funding charters and?
There's always a lot of discussion about that. There's always a lot of debate about that, too. Happens every year, though. You know, every year, there's going to be a debate, because every year, it seems it changes a little bit depending on that particular year and who has the passion to carry that forward.
Okay, Ms. Fisher, and then,
Yeah,
Ms.
so I just,
DeFrivino.
as I'm reading this, it says then that the bill expands the current authorization for district school board members or charter school governing board members to visit schools under their jurisdiction, to specify now that any member of the legislature may visit any public school in his or her legislative district.
But it was real, yes. and
It's including
it's
charter
including-
schools.
It includes, yeah.
Yes.
But is there anybody, I mean, this is my take on that. I don't understand, personally don't understand, why anybody would have any problem having a legislator visit any of their
Right,
schools.
that's
Yeah, I don't get that
We
either.
beg
I mean,
them
you
to
beg
go.
them to
Any-
come visit our
Any
schools.
citizen and any parent can visit
Absolutely,
any
right.
public
Yes,
school.
I can go eat lunch now with my kids unannounced anytime I want. Just have to go to the front office to tell them I want to eat lunch with my kids. Surely they would welcome a legislator coming in wanting a tour.
Hopefully.
I can't imagine that, but there's been a problem somewhere.
Yes,
There's
there
got
had
to
to
be a
have been.
nexus for
So
this.
thus, we need a law.
Yeah, well, that's how we get
but-
laws,
and,
unfortunately. Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. DeFrivino.
The only thing from legal standpoint that's really important in this bill is the removal of
Which
termination.
bill?
Sorry,
758.
758.
the charter school bill,
Thank
is the removal of the words for termination of a charter, other good cause shown. We experienced that with collegiate. So from a legal standpoint, this is changing our landscape even further in terms of our ability to have oversight, the district's ability to have oversight on charter schools.
In addition to the bill, commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went through that in Collier too, with charter school. Okay, 1467, that is the bill that creates the term limits. And it's also the one that modifies school district requirement for instructional materials, allowing parents to get a hold of any instructional materials. And I believe it's the library language for media centers that they have to list out all the books in the media center and library.
And I know that, but this is the bill that actually started out too with taking away
The
salaries.
salaries, yes.
Yeah,
This
right.
originally got rid of
Originally, the
school board
were in
salaries.
there,
Yeah.
And that went away.
So that went away?
Yes,
Sam,
Thank
that
God.
went
The
away.
term limits was,
for this time.
And term limits, it was a trade-off.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, and maybe I'm going out on a limb on this one, but I believe that was just strategy. I believe that it was the term limits they wanted all the time, and so they put the.
Give and take.
Yes.
So it's a game.
Yes, it was, to me, that's how I always took it. It was just a play. Like, oh, well, instead of your salaries, we'll just do term limits, which is what they wanted, because they did this last year.
Correct.
This language
Yeah,
has been around.
This is new, this is not new language.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And Representative Garrison had it last year also.
Now, I have a question. So what if, because this is something that I had brought up, what if we had did our own referendum in our own, and put our own term limits to govern on our own? Would this negate that anyways, if we had done that and had that?
If you have
If
your
we had-
own 12 or 8-year limits?
Yeah, if we had already determined what we wanted as a board, as a referendum.
Just remember that these are statutory changes. So we have these bills, and now they're going to actually become law. So even if you had, let's say that you gave yourself 8-year term limit in your policy, well, when this law comes out, it changes it. You have to abide by whatever the law is.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, the last one is,
Ms. Patrica, did you have a question?
Yes, if someone could refresh my recollection, were changes to, well, not changes, were term limits implemented for our legislators through the constitutional amendment process, or were they implemented through the legislative process?
I hear that's a question.
I would tell you, I believe it was constitutional, but I would have to look up that to be positive. I mean, I'm probably about 80% sure of that. It was long enough ago that I don't really trust my memory, however,
Because it doesn't impact.
I'm glad to
And
look.
Carol, I appreciate that. That's my recollection as well. And the reason why I bring it up is because this will likely be challenged
Heard that
on
too.
constitutional grounds.
Which
You
one?
can't implement term limits for some constitutional officers through the Constitution and then expect to get other term limits for other constitutional officers through the legislative process. I know that there are some school districts that are already looking at bringing suit over this, and I wonder whether you've heard the same.
I have not heard that before now.
I'm surprised.
But I'm not, yeah, but like Ashley said, I'm
I
not
expect it.
surprised. I expect it on a lot of these, actually.
So-
A lot of the things we're talking about today are going to be challenged.
And I can't answer about the constitutional aspect of it. I have to do a little research, but I do know that it is codified now in Florida Statute 1001.35. So we'll double check on the Constitution, but the term limits is in 1001.35.
Yeah, for legislators, yeah. Yeah,
No, for the school board.
for the school board.
Yeah, it's part of the education code now. 1001.35 is the statute. It's the term of office.
It,
Okay.
someday when we have lots and lots and lots of time to talk, which is not today, we can discuss that because I lived that, because I was the first class that came in. I was the last class that came in before term limits hit. So I saw what happened the next year whenever we ended up in the House of Representatives with 70 new members in 1 year.
ooh, oh, wow.
Yeah, so I
We
lived-
still have big
I
classes
lived that,
sometimes.
yeah. That was a huge class that came in right after. But anyway, that's for another time.
The last bill on my list, not on, we don't have to be
Yeah.
done, but is 1557. And that's the bill that's prohibiting classroom instruction on sexual orientation, gender identity in kindergarten through third. And didn't you say there was already a suit out about this one, or is that a different one?
No, this one, Equality Florida has already filed a suit on this one.
Yes. The LGBTQ community, yeah, Equality Florida, yes.
And obviously, there's been political backlash against Disney for them coming out against this bill after the fact. So I feel like this is going to get talked about for a while in the media and in court. So
Definitely.
And it's another thing that becomes very difficult whenever, to what Ms. Vaughn was talking about earlier, about your teachers, especially your new teachers coming in, about, how do you answer, when questions come up, how do you answer them?
Go ahead, Ms. Fisher.
Well,
And then
no,
Ms. Gittens.
because, when that came out, I said, I don't think that we are educating on that in K through 3 anyway, or K through 5, whatever it is.
Great.
And, yeah, so, I just wondered what the climate was in Tallahassee and what the discussion was, because there have to be some people who are aware of what really happens in schools. So many of these things that have been said are out there. I mean,
as a parent of kids, my children have never been talked to about sexual orientation or gender identity in kindergarten through third. In fact, I just read the materials for my 5th grader. So my twins are in 5th grade. They had their health talk Friday and the rest of it today. And I went online and looked at the materials because I was curious, what are you teaching them? And it was mostly about puberty.
right.
About showering and all the things,
Right.
and yes, that is embarrassing to 10-year-old boys and girls, yes, but it wasn't gender. There was nothing about gender identity, and that's
exactly.
5th grade.
Right.
Even my 6th grader, it's lightly touched upon. So I feel like it's more of a political move, feel-good kind of thing for a particular party than it is really about what's going on, because at least as myself, I've never experienced my kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd graders hearing anything about that.
Right.
And I don't think a teacher would want to talk about that in that grade anyway.
No, most of them wouldn't.
No.
And I think even in middle and high school, that,
This day and age.
to my experience, has always been handled on an individual basis, if that did come up. And it hasn't been a problem for the last 25 or 30 years.
And
The
the only
debate was awful.
Yeah, the
Just
concern
awful.
of mine would be more, and I think we talked about this last year, as a counselor, if I had a student come in and talk to me about sexual orientation or gender, where is the line with that? The way I see this is, they have to talk to the parent about the child's coming in, but where is the line drawn? Like, they can't go in and confide in another adult who is non-threatening to them, that's someone that's neutral on this position. That's where I see a problem.
But that's how this started. There was
Yes.
a lawsuit
Right.
in that regard of a child, I don't think the child was a kindergartner,
No.
a child who went to a counselor, went to a teacher, went to someone to talk to them. That person did not share that with the parent. The parent then subsequently finds out. The parent is livid, as probably many of us would be, but at the same time, that child felt comfortable in talking to that person, and
Right.
there was a lawsuit, and then we have a bill like this.
As a longtime school counselor, so if that ever happened, and it did, my training told me that we would talk to the child and offer to help them talk to the parent. I mean, and that typically was what happened successfully. And if they didn't want to, then there was no mention. But one of the things we would say to kids in middle and high school is, anything you say here is confidential, except if you're going to hurt yourself or someone else, or you're in danger. So there would be that disclaimer in the beginning to begin with.
Ms. Gittens and then Ms. Dupree-Bruno.
On the Disney issue, was there discussion about the financial impact to the state
No.
tax-wise about that, or?
That language
having it
showed
now.
up at 5 a.m. and was debated and off the floor before the middle of the afternoon,
Last week.
last week.
And then
literally
it
showed up
passed
that
on
morning.
Thursday, he signed it on Friday.
Right. That was part of the problem. But yeah,
But they can bring it back and fix it.
it can be
That's,
fixed.
yes.
Because, I mean, I have heard that there are definite implications of.
Or those counties and the
Counties.
municipalities.
Yes.
Right.
There's
that-
a lot of concern. And
Yeah.
that was part of the debate, and a legitimate debate, if you will, that there wasn't enough time to do the analysis, the financial analysis, fiscal
Right, I heard
analysis
that.
of how that was
Which-
going to impact anybody. But again, it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't see anybody panicking completely about it yet, other than some in the media who are trying to stir that up, which is, I understand why, because that first blush makes it look really damning, but then whenever you peel the onion, if you will, and you start peeling the onion, you realize there's a lot of time between now and when anything really happens, and
Which
there's
is
time to
next
fix
June.
that. Right, time to fix, 2023. So there's time to fix that.
Mr. Pre-Bruno?
I was just going to say, with regards to 1557, the other thing that's very, at least gives legal pause, is this creation of a new cause of action.
Yes.
And with legal remedies. One of them would be an administrative remedy going to the Department of Education with a commissioner or magistrate reviewing that, as well as being able to file for an injunctive relief in circuit court. And if the parent wins, then there are attorney fees that will be paid. Quantifying what damages would be in this case is something that's going to have to be tested from a legal standpoint. We just don't know yet. But that is one thing that we are definitely aware of and keen that we need to be very careful. I just want to share with the board that from the legal department's standpoint on all of these bills, specifically 7, 15, 57, 14, 67, that we are meeting with academic services. We are trying to come up with some guidelines and some processes, going to be answering some frequently asked questions and providing them with a path forward because, staff is concerned about this, rightfully so. Sure. So we are working on this.
That's very personal.
It becomes very personal. In addition, we are going to be, conferring with our sister districts, the legal departments over there, especially our real counterparts who are larger than us and a little bit smaller than us to kind of see where everybody is. So we are working on that as well. And we now have Neola, so Neola will be able to give us some guidance as their attorneys are reviewing in depth these different laws that are coming in. So I want the board to know that legal is definitely on top of it. We know that these laws are there. We are working with staff. We'll continue to work with staff to make sure that we guide the district as best we can. And as I have said on the dais, as I say continuously to everybody, our legal recommendation will always be to follow whatever the law is. As the law changes, we will change to make sure that we are abiding by whatever these new laws are.
I know, my concern is though, I know the College of Ed, they're having problems with recruiting teachers as well as we are having problems. So now when we're recruiting, we say, House Bill 7, we have House Bill, 1557. So you have to go through all of these that now they have to adhere to all of those as well as worrying about how they're teaching and doing all that. But we want you to come and work for us. It's just really I think it's going to put everybody, I don't care what kind of school you're in, it's going to have a great impact on this.
And Ms. Jordan, if I can just say one more thing, there was one scenario that Carol gave us about that one lawsuit for House Bill 1557. Well, there's another scenario where sometimes you have a teacher where a student asks to have their pronoun and their name changed, and the teacher, without going through anybody else, changes it, and then the parent finds out. So unfortunately, I have not heard of an actual lawsuit being filed because of that. However, I have heard of that fact pattern. So there's lots of fact patterns that we have to walk very carefully in this minefield of this new area of law.
Right. A lot to take in, a lot to take in.
Specifically the one that actually triggered.
It could be.
But that could be.
But as a teacher, I would have assumed the parent knew.
Well, part of that fact pattern too is that, you know, when it was brought, the teacher kind of pushed back a little bit. So there's a lot of things that we just need to be very, very careful with and mindful of.
Right.
That's all.
So, do we have any other questions for the ladies?
I do.
Ms. Patrica?
And this might be more for Attorney Dupree Bruno. I know that 1557 covers curriculum, but I wonder whether you and staff are going to address the issue of wedding photographs on people's desks, whether it be in the office or in the classroom.
So what she's asking is, again, the privacy interests and the interconnection of all of these laws from the federal to the state is massive. So we literally just had this conversation last week, legal and staff, with regards to a particular scenario of whether or not I can put my family picture now on my desk, whether or not.
Doing that when they, like in preschool and kindergarten, you have to do an all about me picture.
Right.
And usually people put a picture of their parents, whether they're same sex, opposite sex, divorced, stepmom, grandparent. And so that was also brought up in the debate. What if you have a child that has parents that are of the same gender? How is that going to work? Is that allowed?
And what happens if you are in a family? Well,
Exactly, that was.
But I did hear people ask Representative Roach, Mr. Donalds, I've heard them ask those questions, and they said that is not what the bill says, that you don't have to choose between if it's mother and mother, because they used a Mother's Day incident. Do you have, can you do two mothers? Can you do this? Does one have to be come in as an aunt and a mother, or how does that look? And they said that does not say that in the bill, and that's not what it's for. But again, it's what Ms. Gittens had said, it's how that person reads this, the verbiage, and what our takeaway is for each one of us.
And legitimate questions.
Yes.
And looking at what, because we, you know, as legal is reviewing these, we're looking at the analysis, the summary analysis from the House in terms of what specifically was their intention. And it's pretty clear what their intention was. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind as well. And where this can come in is when you do have, for example, a poster with my family or all about me, or we're having an event at school and parents are invited to come, and here are both of my moms coming. After that is over, I'm in a kindergarten or third grade class and somebody raises their hand and asks a question. Where is that line drawn? So I just want the board to know that these are things that we are actively discussing. Legal and academic services are actively discussing. And on May 24th, our plan is to present on the equity guide, and some of these questions hopefully will be answered.
Ms. Patrica, did that answer your question, or?
I assumed that was the answer, but that specific question has been asked of me, and I wanted to make sure that it was going to be addressed, so thank you.
No, thank you for bringing that up to our attention. Appreciate that. Did you have, thank you, Ashley.
I'll stay, that's okay.
Yeah, we're just about finished up, but thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn.
I kind of have an overarching question on this, and actually, I brought it up during the last one-on-one. What is the effect, maybe this is more for you, of federal legislation? Because there's some federal legislation that's coming out that's going to be, you know, it is going to. So knowing previous history in this state, we've had issues where the current governor at one point even took forever, and prior governors, in accepting federal aid and argued against it. Does it look like this is going to be something that's on our legal horizon in Florida? And what position does it put us in as a school district that receives federal funds and grants and all of that, when we have this, the contradictions?
Excellent.
What do we do?
Excellent question. Excellent question. There's already federal law that talks about anti-discrimination and how federal funding can be affected if we have discriminatory practices and policies. I think about, I don't know how long ago, we talked about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and I tried to express at that time how law is vast. So we're talking about Florida statutes, but we have regulations, we have agency regulations, we have codes, we have the federal statute. I mean, it's just vast. Case law, all of that encompasses law, and we have to really navigate this very difficult new terrain with all of these legislations that's coming up and balance that with Title IX and Title VII and Title VI and the other federal laws, as well as the Department of Education's reports and recommendations and requirements. So it's vast. So all I can say to the board is that legal knows about it, and we are diligently going through this because we know how intricate this is going to be, and there's going to be a lot of gray, and until some of the courts have had an opportunity to really interpret and give us some guidance, it's going to be a lot of gray, but we're going to do the best we can to make sure that the district is on the right side of the law.
But I guess the crux of what I'm asking is
Which one do you go by?
is there any guideline to which, if it's federal
Well, they'll say,
versus state, if there's any that takes
so the
precedence?
What trumps it?
United States Supreme Court always trumps, right? That's the Supreme
exactly.
Court of the land. The United States Constitution is the Supreme Court of the land. Now, depending on the fact pattern, it depends on the fact pattern, because I can't give you a blanket answer as to, will federal law always trump? It just really depends as whether or not this is under federal law jurisdiction. So we'll have to, as these come out, we will go ahead and review and revise and make sure that we are in accordance with all law. And thank goodness for Neola, because that's what Neola does. It looks at federal, state, all of these administrative agencies from federal and state, everything, to be able to give us the best guidance. And then we take those, we tweak it to our district, and then present it to the board. So we're working on it. We know it. We'll do the best we can to make sure we're on the right side of the law.
But even if they are doing the policies and they understand all that, we still then have to implement all of that, which comes from the new policies.
And I will say, this is the superintendent. Legal can say this needs to be done, but if only 50% or 70 or 80% of the schools are doing it,
Consistency.
it needs to be consistent across the board.
So do we have any other
Very
questions?
complicated.
Very
issue.
complicated.
Fisher, did you have,
Issues. Very complicated issues,
Yeah.
not just one.
did you have another?
Yes, I did. So Attorney Dupree-Bruno, you said it was pretty evident what their intention was with 1557. What was that intention?
So prior to the Parents' Bill of Rights, there was an absence, well, arguably, there was an absence in the law in terms of what is the obligation to notify parents about certain things. And specifically, the legislature is looking at LGBTQ, gender identity, transgender issues. That's what they're looking at. So the Parents' Bill of Rights came into effect, and that gave us some guidance, but some felt it was not strong enough. So now they are giving us this 1557. When you read it, I know everybody is concerned about the K through 3, what you can teach in the classroom. 1557 talks a lot about the responsibility of parents to educate their child. It talks about the well-being. It goes broader. We're not just talking about mental health. We're talking about well-being, emotional, physical, everything. And that the parents are the ultimate decision makers in terms of morality, in terms of certain things that are being taught. And then we're still discussing in terms of the responsibility from a legal standpoint of the district and district staff to either, one, disclose. We're not, I don't want to speak too much because I'm still working with staff. We're talking this through, and May 24th we'll have better answers. But part of the bill says that the district has to encourage conversation between parent and student when one of these issues come up. They say well-being, mental health, emotional, physical, but really what they were looking at as LGBTQ issues. And or encourage and facilitate the discussion. So where that, what is our absolute requirement to do, that's something that we're still trying to talk through. So I don't know if that answered your question, Ms.
Right,
Fisher.
well, because, like, parents have always had rights.
Right.
And schools have always worked diligently to get parent involvement, not expecting the kind of involvement that we have currently. But, you know, as a longtime school counselor at elementary level, I mean, 30 years ago, we had students who had two moms. The kids never asked any questions about it. That was just their family. I mean, it was like not a big deal, but I understand that now with the media and social media and all that, it is.
I don't necessarily think that having the two moms necessarily is the big deal. I think the big deal is when you have a student that goes to school and is relaying information about gender identity and where they fit in and asking for some assistance. When does the parent get notified that this is even an issue? Because there's certain, like for example, pregnancy, we don't really disclose that. So if I broke up with my boyfriend yesterday, we don't really disclose that. There's certain things that we just never have had to disclose.
Exactly.
And so now the question is, what's our responsibility in disclosing this to parents?
So I think that there's an assumption with educators that parents know their children, and I understand that we have all different kind of families nowadays. It's a lot different, but there have been times when people have come here and spoken and said, you know, you didn't tell me that my kid was gay. Well, don't you know this? I mean, really? That's really what I wanted to say, but I didn't. But I will next time. So, yeah, it is. It's a dilemma. It is. It's really.
It's a big deal.
And I think that's going to be, I mean, legal definitely has its work cut out because, you know, even in, you know, the first paragraph as opposed to the second, the first paragraph is saying that you must require district personnel to encourage students. Then the second one says that school district procedures may authorize school district personnel to withhold information.
And that withholding is for abuse and neglect.
Well, but it's based on how, if I feel, or if they feel that you may be. So again, it goes back to that human.
So I'm going to,
human.
Ms. Jordan, sorry. I'm going to share part of a discussion that legal had with staff just the other day. A scenario where you have a student who comes to a counselor and says, I'm having these concerns, not even concerns, but this is where I think that I belong, right? This is what my gender identity is, but I don't want my parents to know about it, because if my parents know about it, my dad's gonna kill me. Now, kids say this all the time. If I go home with this half, my parents are just gonna get me. They say it all the time. It was not reported. This happened years ago. It was not reported. Child turns 18, is graduating, and then finally does reveal to their parents that this is where I am. Kid is in ICU for 2 weeks because dad beat him up. So these are the dilemmas that we face because we have to work with our mental health folks who understand, and they have their own code of ethics, which is very difficult, as well as balance the legal responsibility to make sure that the district is navigating this line very, very carefully.
And that's
it's a
why
dilemma.
we're mandated reporters.
Exactly.
And it's
Would
stronger
you
for
have
this.
reported, though? Would you have reported that? If the kid just kind of flippantly says that?
I mean, again, I think all of these situations have to be dealt with individually because different families are different and different kids are different.
Yeah.
But when there ever was an indication that kids were in danger, yes, we reported.
In that definition, so one good thing is we have two attorneys who are very well-versed in Chapter 39, which is the abuse, abandonment, and neglect statute. So that's one thing that we'll be working with staff on as well.
Okay. We probably could have this conversation all day.
Thank you.
Miss,
I have one last comment, if I may.
yes, please.
I'm wondering whether the board is willing to consider accelerating the legislative platform process so that we can be out in the public discussing our legislative platform items beginning as early as this summer. As you all know, these relationships with legislators are not to take place just during legislative session. And the more support we can get from the community regarding our legislative platform items, the better off we are. And the way we do it now is, in my estimation, way too late in the year. If we could turn around a legislative platform in the next 4 or 6 weeks and start to hit the ground running with the public and update them, let them know what it is, I think we'll be in better shape for next year.
Okay, well, I'm going to go, thank you, Ms. Patrica. I'm going to go to Ms. Gittens, and then I'm going to ask Carol what her thought process is on that. Ms. Gittens.
I think we have to be mindful that it's a political and an election year. And I have said this on other issues. You know, I'm running for office. I'm not willing to get into the legalities of all of this at this point. And it is such a legal, you know, hot button. I would not feel comfortable doing that. And bringing it up sooner than we normally do just puts some of us in a, you know, a really difficult situation. And if everyone else, then I will not be involved in anything other that smacks of legalities or whatever at this time. I just think it's a conflict if you are running for office at this point.
And I don't think that she's, from my understanding, if I'm wrong, Ms. Patrica, let me know, but you're just talking about like for the upcoming next year, to start talking about what that looks like for us, not on what we have just discussed at this moment. And then
That's correct, and I do believe that we have done a good job of avoiding very controversial issues on our legislative platform, because generally speaking, we're not going to ask for something we know we're not going to get. And this is an issue that I brought up when I was running for re-election as well. It's about the timing of the creation and approval of our legislative platform and making sure that we're getting out there and we're talking about it all year instead of talking about it just during legislative session.
Okay, and then Ms. Gittens, and then if Carol, if you will put kind of just.
I have no opinion.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you anyway.
My question was, if we're talking about moving things up, if anything, it would be, and I don't know if you guys would be ready, Attorney Bruno, before the 24th, if it's something that we felt was, you mentioned that the 24th of May, that we were going to get an update or something from you.
So we've been working on an equity guide.
Right.
I would call it almost like a civil rights guide for staff and students. So on the 24th, we're going to be presenting that guide to the board. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's part of.
No, if it was not directly related to this. I thought it was something that.
Well, 1557 is definitely going to be a part of that. The guide is not a LGBTQ guide. It's an equity guide that will talk about Title 7 and 6 and 9 and 2 and discrimination in general. And it's going to be very legal.
And just very factual.
Very factual.
Okay. So if anything, I would reiterate that whenever possible to the public, that on May 24th, tune in and see what all the legalities and that we have to follow. That's where we're at.
So, real quick, Dr.
Yeah,
Savage?
just wanted to kind of echo the last two comments and what Ms. Patrica kind of stated. When I was in Tallahassee working the DOE, because we haven't talked about that, the DOE often has to take a lot of these bills, start to figure out how they're going to do it, what direction from the State Board of Education, the commissioner, to try to help districts understand how to process this, as well as the superintendents across the state. That was a lot of what the most recent fads was talking about, how these things are implemented. But one piece that I would want to echo that Ms. Patrica really brought up, not about anything controversial, but just to say timing. One of the things I learned when I was up there is you have to really be working on next session right now. By the time you even get to committees in the fall, you're already too late. It's already there's way too much. I don't know that necessarily has to get out and talk about it. I don't know if that's always the most effective advocacy if the relationships aren't super strong, but I would just say that in terms of clarity around what you want to do and how to be strategic to actually accomplish it, there's no time to waste. I mean, that's something that if you had the ground running, if you felt like you had a really strong platform right now that you wanted to advocate for theoretically through a much more strategic approach, I just think she's right on the money that you'd want to get into that now. And I think how you get receptivity on the other side is maybe a little bit more of a complicated conversation than that. But Carol, I didn't know if that would help your experience in this regard or at all either.
And then Ms. Giovanelli, and we are 25 minutes over, so I do apologize
I
for
won't
that.
keep it, but typically we start talking about this in the fall because it's in the legislature session is January or February. That is too late. That is her point. And so I understand exactly what she's saying. We need to talk about it now, establish if it's 1 through 5 or 1 through 6, whatever our most important advocacy is for Tallahassee, and lay them out earlier than later. That's really the bottom line.
It is the advocacy part.
And I would tell you too that, and Ms. Gittens, I don't lose sight of the fact it's an election year. I can promise you that, because that's something that I keep tabs on all the time, along with scheduling. And scheduling this year is going to be a lot different, to Ms. Giovanelli's comment. But let me just really quickly. Our legislative priorities for fiscal year 22, this fiscal year, this session we just went through, here's just the titles of them. Career and technical education.
Always one.
Early learning, exceptional student education, which we know we had some work on this year. Teacher certification and retention. Excuse me, my fingers aren't going to open that. There we go. Safety and security, facilities, transportation, comprehensive health, innovation, school. Those things are not, to my way of thinking, controversial issues. Those are issues that are your platform. Your platform isn't 1557.
Right.
You're working, that's fact. And I mean, yet to be determined because of the lawsuits. But that's where that is. What we need to look at are these types of things and what changes have happened to these types of things. And we do, my suggestion, you as a board and as your superintendent and your new superintendent too, need to be looking at are these things still on our list?
Right.
Are they not on our list? Has something changed?
And that's what I'm saying, to compare the two, but that list that we have, if it hasn't gone through, that's what we're working on.
Right.
And that's fine, we've already put that out there and they know where we stand.
But there's updates.
But
We have to tweak it.
Right, is it already in a law now? So.
Yeah, so this is what they're talking about.
Yes, ma'am, there have been changes. There's been some things enacted that have changed these, but I would suggest to you that yes.
Okay, so we will put that on the list to do that, and then we will work off of that to see if this is something we still have in our mind. And then, of course, speaking with everyone, is there something else that we need to add to this or make this stronger, the words? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is there anything else I can address for
Well,
anyone?
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
That
I
you
only do
did.
softballs. The lady who does hardballs is left. She's raising 4 young children, so she's used to hardball play.
But you do well
Yes,
standing there with
thank you
that.
very much. We
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
Thank you all very much,
Appreciate it.
too. I
Very much.
always look forward to seeing you and appreciate the invitation to be here today, and good luck on the rest of your day and tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Does anybody need a 5-minute break? 5-minute break, please. And then we will
see
return.
this?
And thank you for keeping the time. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Good to see you, too. Yeah, thank you.
How are you doing?
Doing
Are
good.
we in a 5-minute break?
5-minute break, please. It's 12, say 2:30, 2:35 we'll start. Back.
Stay safe.
Oh, yes, yes, good to see you all.
Bye.
Call anytime.
I will. Thank you.
Are we on break? Did you see this? Talk about Speak of the Devil?
Oh, I'm glad to be here today. It's always nice to have a chance to have some dialogue.
Because I'm not
Right?
gonna make it.
I could really use some coffee
I'm not gonna make it if I don't get some.
Try to hydrate through it.
Look at our emails.
Colorblind now is about
Uh-huh. Look at the emails. 12:11 or 12:12, this came in. Teacher training press inquiry.
Mic check.
Are we not on break?
We are on break.
But it's like Speak of the Devil. There it is already.
And
Okay, thank you.
if I got under there,
I think that Miss,
I'd be fine.
Ladies, and gentlemen, members of the public, we are back from our 5.5-minute break. The time now is 2:38, and the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's contracts, Dr. Bernier's superintendent and consultant contracts, and this was a question that had came up at another meeting. So we have 3 contracts that we are speaking on. Dr. Savage, 621, Dr. Bernier of 322. The 2 specific points, notice and employment. Subsection 8, administrative pay grade as before for a minimum of 1 year. B is 9A, 30 days notice before the desired termination, which is something that we would have to also look at because of the fact if we were, the topic of conversation was, would we consider, or would, actually not just us, Dr. Savage and Dr. Bernier, consider a change of date from May 16th to May 9th. And that was brought before us by a board member, Ms. Patrica. And so in that, Ms. Dupree-Bruno was asked to go back from the board to go back and have conversation, which she has had that conversation. So today we both will be speaking on this and having the conversation on where do we want to go. Earlier today, Mr. Dupree-Bruno had sent the what the costs would be affiliated with these changes, so you all have that. And she has spoken to both of them, and from my understanding, Mr. Dupree-Bruno, they both would be willing to change or have the contracts amended.
So let me go ahead and give a report to the board on that. I did have an opportunity to have multiple conversations with both Dr. Savage as well as Dr. Bernier with regards to whether or not one would be in agreement to terminate his contract sooner than what he was noticed to terminate. That would be Dr. Savage. And then the other to come in earlier than what his contract depicted him for him to do. In my conversations with both, it would appear that they are amenable to do that, but the earliest date that they could do that would be May 9th, which would be a week prior to when Dr. Bernier would be starting, because his start date would be May 16th, and then taking a week away from Dr. Savage. Now, Dr. Bernier has a consultant contract from April 15th through May 15th for $15,000. He would request that full payment from that consultant contract be adhered to. Dr. Savage has 2 clauses in his contract from the June 21 contract that I think is needs to be carefully considered by the board. The first is that under subsection 8, as part of being an interim superintendent where he was removed from his chief position to become the interim superintendent and all of the risk that is associated with being an interim superintendent, as you never know how long that's going to last, he was guaranteed a 1 year, minimum 1 year position at the same equivalent administrative pay grade that he was at before, so another chief position, if you will, for at least a year, a minimum of 1 year. In addition, his contract required a 30-day notice. So if the board wanted to terminate his contract, they needed to provide him with a 30-day notice. And that's reasonable because people have to make plans and, figure out what their next steps will be. Now, the board did adhere to the 30-day notice at the last meeting. So Dr. Savage has the 30 days with the anticipation that the termination would actually occur upon the swearing in of Dr. Bernier, which was scheduled for May 16th. So that gave him his 30 days. Now the board is, if the board desires, wants to take away a week from that notice. Now, the second thing is, when you're planning out your life, obviously, you're counting what your financial obligations are. So there would be a reduction in salary for Dr. Savage if he were to go into the chief position earlier than what was allocated pursuant to the termination date. So, bless you. So what we have is, bless you, for Dr. Bernier to start the 1 week earlier, obviously he would receive his superintendent salary. That would be on May 9th. The superintendent, the change in that superintendent in terms of the gross cost will be $6,505.50.
Can I, Ms. DePrubano, can I also add in there, as you're stating these, the cost, we have to remember, we're speaking about 1 week. This is it. So Dr. Bernier is here already with us. He is a consultant, so he is here actually working together side by side with Dr. Savage. So the two of them are working, collaboratively, making sure that everything is the way we need to do that. So I just want you to have that in your mind as we, Mr. Pre-Bruno is speaking on these prices, or not prices, the cost that's affiliated to this, and then at the final cost of the difference for the 1 week. Ms. Gittens?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're talking about spending $7,600 to change all of this for a week. Honestly, I cannot support this. It's 1 week, and like you said, they're both here. We can reach out and touch both of them if we need to and ask them questions. I don't see how we would justify to the taxpayer spending $7,000 that we really don't need to spend. Now, my question is, where are we on the position for Dr. Savage? Because that's the other part of his contract.
That position would be, bless you, Savage, and Dr. Savage is right here. Although speaking about a person who's not here, he's definitely here. So, and he's very much aware of the conversations that have been had, and he's himself have had multiple conversations. So that that position would would not have anything to do with us. It would be between Dr. Savage and
is that what the contract?
Let me add to that.
Yes.
So the contract specifically says that Dr. Savage gets a position for a minimum of 1 year equivalent to the administrative pay grade that he had before, which was, he was a chief of operations at that time. So now what kind of chief, I think that's up to the superintendent, the new superintendent that will be incoming, to determine what placement he finds for the interim superintendent in his wheelhouse, in his cabinet, if you will.
And then that would be when Dr. Bernier is sworn in. At that moment that he is sworn in, Dr. Savage would then step into that new role. So pre that date, he should have already been having that conversation.
Let me add to that. Let me add that to that, Ms. Jordan. So what I anticipate happening is not at this meeting, but at the next action meeting, which would be a week prior to Dr. Bernier starting, that both Dr. Bernier and Dr. Savage will have settled on whatever this position will be. And then at that point, we will have an agenda item that basically says that upon the swearing in of Dr. Bernier, Dr. Savage will be taking on this particular position. This will come before the board, I guess it will be on May 10th, and the board can vote on it at that time.
I think the only thing that was just a little weak in the whole thing for me, and I'm not a legal person, would have been defining that process a little more definitively, because technically we are in a contract with Dr. Savage. The new superintendent is not. So within the contract that we have with him, that we would provide an acceptable, whatever position, similar to what he came out of. I think it just should have been worded that way, because, I mean,
Interestingly enough, this actually was, I was speaking to one of my colleagues from another district who had a similar issue. And interestingly enough, this has happened in multiple districts where you have this type of negotiation. The incoming superintendent really can't change the contractual terms between the board and the interim superintendent. That's your contract.
Right,
You've
no, I
already
know that.
said it.
And I know that, but what I'm saying is, when we signed the contract and signed off on it and voted for it, we said, we will provide you with a position that is equal to what you are leaving.
Correct.
Okay? In this situation, it's not an issue, but legally, you could have, an adversarial situation where someone coming in says, we're gonna pay you, but you're gonna do this over here. So
Still has to be it could be in Timbuktu, but it still has to be within that same pay grade. The only thing that you guaranteed was you're going to get a job at the same rate of pay that you had before. That was the only thing that was guaranteed.
There's no caveat, so he could just be sent anywhere, and I'm just saying that.
Gonna have to balance as well. The superintendent coming in needs to have people that he feels is comfortable to work with. So there's a little bit of I understand exactly what you're saying, because some of the school board attorneys just had this conversation in terms of, the incoming superintendent being able to make those personnel decisions. We just had this conversation. I think it's a balancing act where the board has guaranteed a position contractually. The incoming superintendent has to abide by that contract, but to kind of control where he puts somebody in that scheme, now you're controlling the superintendent's ability to do whatever he feels is necessary as he's coming into the district. So fortunately, this worked out well. I know another district that it may not work out as well, but at least for us, thank goodness, we have one thing that actually worked out well in Lee County. So.
Yeah, we have X number of chief positions currently. Do we have a chief position that would be a logical, viable
New position?
Yes, you can, because we do
place?
have.
Or, and the other part of that is, okay, so the people who currently, not to get anybody nervous, but I just want to know the whole thing. The people that are currently in chief positions, their contracts end in, as of July 1st, the end of June, right? They haven't been renewed yet, and what?
I can answer those. I can answer those questions.
Okay, they haven't been renewed yet, and my question is, the second part of it is it, will Dr. Bernier be able to do any switching if he wanted to for the current chief positions?
And I can answer those
and
questions.
for the people who have expiring contracts?
Yeah.
The answer would be yes, because he would be the
Yeah, well,
superintendent.
that's what I'm assuming, but I just want to hear it.
Yes.
This was very intentional, as you know. I mean, I think the part of just that timing, when we signed this initial agreement, we don't know if this lasts 3 months, a month, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 10 years, whatever it ended up being. So we had to make it generic enough to, now that we are there and we are at that moment, one of the decisions that I made months ago was that it would be I think, inappropriate for the next superintendent to not have him have the opportunity to move things around. I think he's worked in a lot of big districts, high-performing districts, that there may be structural elements that he would want it to represent. So something that we have been in the process of for quite some time and will not be finalized immediately. It'll be something that he has every opportunity to work on is, of course, that. So I was very intentional not to have any of the upper level reappointments done so that he would have, people essentially are reappointed up through June 30th.
Right.
Come June 30th, and what we work on right now and have been working on since November, December, and so forth, in earnest, really is the budget. And that's next year's budget. We're working on it now. And so some of the positions we have left vacant, for example, Ms. Stillwell's Chief Strategic Engagement Officer, that has not been hired. Chief Operations, have left that vacant as well. Because we at least now had executives in those seats, that in prior we only had one executive. Now we have an executive executive over each core area of operations. So I did not feel it was necessary to rush and do that. These give opportunities for Dr. Bernier not only to hire new people if he were to want that, but also to reposition people accordingly. And I think that's part of the learning mission that he's on right now is what's working well and what would you maybe want to do in year 1, but maybe you want to do something different in year 2. And so what is he comfortable with right out of the gate? And then what does he feel like he absolutely must make changes and should be empowered to do so, in my professional opinion, as superintendent? That is, you hire him. He is really supposed to hire and identify the people that he is going to rely upon every single day. And so while that is not a comfortable position for senior leaders to be in, where you don't know necessarily what that will entail, and that is somewhat of a stress, I think people have been very pleased that he's been so receptive. I mean, he's been calling people, he's been meeting with people, he's been checking in on folks and just getting a chance to know everyone, as well as board members. And it's very hard to come in that compressed, but that's why he's been doing it. He's been very active long before his consulting started, learning about our district. So just want to reiterate now, as far as me, because those positions are open, there certainly is the unit. But he may decide that as part of his budget recommendations, let's say he wanted to do something completely different from that. Maybe like in Orange, for example, they have lots of associate superintendents and things along those lines. The budget is somewhat of a fluid piece, and I think what he's going to try to do in his conversations with you all is maybe help frame that whole conversation of what's the nature of the complexity of work that's going to have to take place both now and in the next 6 months and the next year to really help the organization. And I think that isn't so much a question of units as much as it is a body of work in terms of leadership development, leadership identification, recruitment potentially of additional folks. I can't summarize all of what he's going to say.
Yeah, but, okay, so what I was trying to get with this, we talk about this transition and these contracts, and you're guaranteed the chief position. It could be either a current chief position, but you said it could be, and it could be like a position that doesn't exist, except the board would have to approve that if it's, and the other thing that has to do, I believe, with Dr. Bernier's contract, isn't there a 100-day plan?
That he will be
And
getting to
so
us.
when will we see that after
Once he's the superintendent.
once he's the superintendent?
superintendent.
He will unveil it, and yet theoretically, it could be changing the current organizational chart, adding maybe a new layer, things that would take a while to do, right?
Well,
I'm just
No, you're thinking out
running
loud.
through this
Yeah.
to make sure I understand all of these things as we do the transition, and, the placement of Dr. Savage, and whether he's in a placeholder position or whatever, but a lot of that depends on what our new superintendent is going to propose to us.
That's right.
Propose to us as possibly a new organizational pattern.
Correct, and that was the goal of bringing somebody in as a consultant, so that way those things can be tweaked and figured out prior to the handoff.
Yep.
So,
It's just the budget. We're in the budget season, so the natural way for people to shift, the cleanest way from a budgetary standpoint, from a reappointment standpoint, is that June 30th to July 1st moment, and it just happens to line up. The problem is, will that give him sufficient time? That does not preclude him from making shifts other points in the year as well. It's just then you're doing it in a budget year that's already underway, as opposed to making adjustments from one budget year to the next budget year, which is typically how it's carried out. But that doesn't mean you can have reorganizations and appointment decisions and movements then throughout the year.
It won't be, though, on the day of the handoff.
No.
It'll be
I wouldn't anticipate.
when he is actually, that's what I just want to clarify for me, for all of us, for the
okay, so,
the people out there in
so
Cyberland.
the moment that Dr. Bernier is sworn in, Dr. Savage will then have a new position.
Yes,
And that's where we need to make sure that all of that works hand in hand. And as I said, they are working very much together in making this happen. But I guess at the end of the day, we're back here in this conversation because we were asked to have Mr. Bruno go out and have conversations with both of them, bring those back, and allow us to have this conversation on, do we want to really push it a week earlier or just let it lay where it's at? And I know Ms. Gittens has already spoken, bless you, spoken on her thought, but I'm gonna, if Mr. Bruno, will you just go ahead and I'm sorry that I cut in on you, finish the end, where the difference of the fees.
So with Dr. Savage, it would be $1,108.88. So having Dr. Savage leave 1 week earlier and having Dr. Bernier come 1 week earlier would be a total cost of $7,614.38.
So that's nothing's going to change. So I mean, it's just that 1 week in the salary, Miss
Yeah,
Ms.
so
Fisher?
I think since the plan was made, and we've already announced that Dr. Bernier would be sworn in on May 16th, I think we should leave it as it is for the
So,
1 week.
for 7
I
days.
think we should just keep it uncomplicated and leave it the way we planned it to begin with, so that we look like we have our act together, and we also follow through with what we said we would do, and improve the level of trust from the community. And
Spoken as a true counselor.
Thank you for that. Ms. Giovanelli?
And I completely concur,
Okay, so that's three of you.
because I believe that we have a contract, and we need to stick with the contract that we put in place. I think it shows integrity, and I think that we really need to really work on that, so I think this is a start. And this was the plan. We already have a plan. Why would we deviate from that? I certainly do not think we should pay an additional $7,600 that we don't need to. I mean, just stick with the contract.
And then also too, Dr. Bernier, as well as Dr. Savage, he has been out there engaging in the community, making sure that he understands what the community is about, as well as coming in here, speaking to everyone. So I think I think it's working out very well, with that, and people are very accepting of him. Would you say that, Dr. Savage?
It has been wonderful having him with, taking him everywhere. It's just been great to be able to take him around, and he picks up things very, very quickly. It's a lot of opportunity to just build new relationships, and it's just it's been a very smooth opportunity to make it seamless. I will give credit to Dr. Atkins. When I was coming in, we had a little bit of that overlap period, but see, I already knew a lot of people here. There's a lot of people I didn't know yet. I've just been very impressed with Dr. Bernier's engagement, and it's been a fun experience. We've had a chance to just get to know each other a little bit more, and just having him in person, because of course you have phone calls and Zoom meetings and things like that, but actually having him physically present in our board member one-to-ones, it gives him a chance in business cabinet. He got to speak on some issues. I just think it's been a very good experience. But that said, I think that's my comment was, if this was something that he really wanted to start early, if that was really something that he just wanted to get right to it and forego some of that time period, certainly I would defer to be amenable to those kind of things. But I think under the circumstances, it sounds like that's all I had.
Right, but I also want to add too, because I'm out there and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues are out there too, when you're out there, the relationship and what the community, and I think a couple have spoken about the community, what they are seeing is they're seeing you there with him as the interim, and you make sure you always say that now, I'm not sure, you still are the superintendent, okay, so you are saying that, and then introducing the incoming. So when they see that, I think that especially out in the community, I think that really resonates well with what's going on. It's like, okay, this is going to be a nice relationship. So that's just my thought, because that's what I see and that's what I hear out there. Miss Morgan, are you online yet? Are you there?
I think that Ms. Roman went to go assist her with that.
Okay. Ms. Patrica, are you there?
Yes, thank you. I was not anticipating any kind of financial impact from this at all. Given the fact that there is a financial impact, I agree we should wait the extra week. And I do have to say that there is no lack of integrity in renegotiating a contract that's already in place. There is a significant lack of integrity in breaching a contract. But if the parties to a contract come together and decide to make a change, and that change in our circumstances is made publicly with public input, there's no lack of integrity there. All of that being said, I'm comfortable with leaving the contracts as they are and avoiding net financial impact on the district. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. So the only, I know that, Ms. Giddens, I'm going to call on you in a second. I know Ms. Morgan's been trying to call in, so we'll give her an opportunity to speak once we get her on. Ms. Giddens?
I just wanted to let you all know that we had discussed in the last meeting about updating the superintendent search website.
Yes.
I did not go further with that until this meeting today.
Perfect.
Because I had no idea, and I felt, like Ms. Fisher was saying, why would we put something out, have the meeting today, and have to retract it? So if we are leaving here with a consensus on that, then I will have something to say.
Okay. And so then I will say, going forward, what it looks like it will be, and we'll make sure you have all that information, Ms. Gittens, is that let me get a calendar.
16th.
16th, Monday.
Oh, that's right, because we just changed it. So the So the 16th, we have a workshop. Yes, okay, that's it. So the 16th, we have a workshop. Dr. Savage would be, that would be his last workshop with us. And then that evening, at 5 o'clock, we would then have the swearing in on the 16th of Dr. Bernier of May. Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Yes.
Ms. Jordan, I think, let me just make sure that I have these dates right, because I thought that the meeting was the 9th and the 10th.
Yeah, I don't think it's the 16th.
The 16th would just be a swearing in, not a meeting.
Why do I have that on here then? Okay, I'm sorry, this is me having a meeting.
Okay. So on the 10th, at the action meeting,
It was
there's,
the 21st or 25th if we were going to change this. Okay.
Right.
So, rewind.
at the action meeting, there will be a special agenda item that basically depicts that upon the swearing in of Dr. Bernier on the 16th,
Correct.
Dr. Savage will be in this particular position.
That's correct.
It's not on our calendars.
It will be. Because of this conversation we were having, they were waiting for us to determine what the next step is, because of course they have to advertise that that is going to take place. So then Dr. Savage would be, his last meeting would be Tuesday, May 10th with us at the action meeting. I know you just love that, so.
On the 9th, I'm not even showing a workshop, is that correct? There's,
On the 9th, safety procedures.
it says safety protocols.
That's at 10:30.
At 10:30 and 9:15,
Ms. Roman has something.
Yes.
something else.
Okay, perfect.
Your mic's not, yeah.
To come down here?
No.
So May 9th, we have a
It's a workshop, I see. I had
workshop,
to
and then
go
on
further.
Tuesday, 1 o'clock, we have the briefing. 5:30, we have a student performance and an action meeting. At that meeting, that will be Dr. Savage's last meetings. Then on that following,
On the 10th.
his last meeting, however, he's still going to be the superintendent. So let me clarify that.
16th.
Until the 16th, that's just going to be his last action meeting. And then he will stay with us as the superintendent until the 5 o'clock hour when we bless Dr. Bernier as the new superintendent. Yeah, and then Ms. Morgan, hello?
Lost her.
Just went somewhere.
Ms. Jordan, I don't think that Ms. Vaughn had an opportunity to say.
Sorry, Ms. Vaughn.
Ditto to
Everybody
what
else?
my colleagues have already said and their reasons as well.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
Okay, Ms. Morgan, you're on speaker. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Morgan. Welcome. We're in the item that we're on at this moment is the discussion that we were having regarding the superintendent's contract and changing it to the 9th versus the 16th. Thus far, the conversation that we've had, everyone is in favor, including Ms. Patrica, who had brought this forward, to keeping it as such due to the fact of the cost of the $7,600. So that's the conversation that we're at right now.
Yeah, and I've been following it.
Oh, okay.
And that's fine with me. The only thing that I haven't heard, because I was trying to establish a connection, apparently there's been some decision about what position Dr. Savage will be taking.
Say that again, please.
Will Dr. Savage be taking?
Oh, as far as the position, that will be Dr. Bernier. They are in conversations on what will be taking place, and I know that I assume that they have been speaking, and so I haven't seen them, I'm just assuming that, but that will be a decision that.
I was hoping it wasn't settled, that option is still open. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
What was that last comment?
The option is still open.
The option is
She
still
was
open.
hoping that it was not settled and that the
Not in
option was
stone.
still open.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still open. So, and so.
Ms. Jordan,
Go ahead,
is Ms.
please.
Morgan not able to call on the conference line?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and call her on my cell. Ms. Morgan, is she still there?
She's still.
She is, just tell her that she'll call.
I'll call her.
Because this conversation's almost over.
Okay.
So just to reiterate,
Go
to
ahead,
know what's put on there, the 9th and the 10th of May will be Dr. Savage's last official duties as superintendent.
No. That's his board meetings. And
It's
then-
last, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And then he
That'll be the
will,
last meetings that he will officiate.
correct.
But he, on the 16th, there, at what time? 5.
As soon as he's sworn in, so it could be 5:01, so we don't want to put a time. As soon as he is sworn in, Dr. Bernier is sworn in, then Dr. Savage will take another role.
Excuse me,
Right,
Ms.
I
Jordan.
will just say, at a 5 o'clock meeting. he
We're
will
going to
be
see
sworn.
if she's on.
Ms. Morgan, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gittens, it will just be a swearing in, it will not be a meeting. So it's
Well, I'm,
And reception.
right. So the schedule,
Right.
the
So
schedule
I'm just-
swearing in will be 5 o'clock. And Dr. Carlin, if I'm
Right.
saying something wrong, let me know. So at 5 o'clock is when the swearing-in ceremony will take place here in the boardroom,
and a reception.
which will follow, yes, a reception will follow. So it'll be about 5, I don't know if you need to put that on there.
No, I'm not going to put that, I'm
5:30.
just going to say,
Just to follow.
at a
Followed by
5
it.
o'clock swearing-in event, and I'll explain what happens then, and a reception to follow.
And
Correct.
just from, Ms. Jordan, if I may, just from a legal standpoint, it's really important to note that this is not a board meeting.
Right,
This is just a
I
swearing in,
took
not
out
a
meeting,
board. Okay.
and I just called it an event.
yes.
And then pursuant to the contract, there's leeway, so if you are running 20 minutes or 15
Right.
minutes behind, that's okay, because the contract terms say upon the swearing in on the 16th.
Versus the US at noon.
Right, we just want to make sure that it doesn't have a specific time.
No,
Only
I'm not
because
putting-
of people holding us to, you started at 5:00, it's 5 o'clock and now it's 5:01. Ms. Fisher, did you have anything else for that? Okay.
I think Ms. Morgan is waiting.
Yeah, Ms. Morgan, we can hear you really good now. Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Pri-Bruno, you have heard what everyone's comment is, so
So
this,
based on the comments that I've heard, I
just-
will no longer pursue an amendment to either of the contracts.
perfect.
Need to take consensus or anything? No.
I don't think we do.
Not directing me to do anything at
yeah.
this point.
So it's just the way we already had scheduled it to be, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you, that was Great conversation.
Madam Chair, may I jump in for a moment?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Patrica.
Just as a point of order, I apologize for being late to today's meeting. I was in an FHSAA board meeting. I will update you all on that tomorrow during my board member comments. In addition, as is typical for me on a Monday, I have a 4 o'clock hard stop. So I will be jumping off the call at around 3:58 in order to join that 4 o'clock meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. We had noted already that you were at the meeting, so thank you so much. So right now, we're doing really good on time. Thank you, ladies. So we are moved on to, I'm sorry, Ms. Vaughn?
Wasn't Mr. LaRosa up for
The
a
position?
position?
SAA.
Yeah.
Was
Did we
he
find
selected
that
for
out?
that?
I don't,
Ask her.
One of 4.
Miss,
I thought it was Saturday.
Mr. Craig Damon is the new executive director of the FHSAA. Mr. LaRosa was certainly a very, very impressive candidate, and he gave a fantastic interview. We had 5 very, very impressive candidates, and I believe the board was blessed in the sense that any one of them that was chosen would have led the association well into the future. It just happened that Mr. Craig Damon was chosen, and the board is thrilled, but we are also very grateful to Mr. LaRosa and the others who applied for sort of strengthening that pool and giving us a very good choice.
great. Thank you, Ms. Patrica. And I'm sure that you'll report on that tomorrow as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we are moving right along, and we are at the good of the order. And Ms. Giovanelli, I'm going to start with you over there.
I don't have really anything other than one quick question, well, a couple things. I will not be here for the May 16th swearing in, so my apologies, but I will be probably somewhere in Texas by that point. Hopefully farther on this side of it than that, but my daughter graduates that weekend, so I will be.
Congratulations.
Unfortunately, I'm flying out because I want to make sure I make the meetings, and then that's not unfortunate, actually, but my husband will be driving out when I'm still here. So no, that's positive, but flights are so expensive, I'm having to ride back with him, and that's not what I want to do, but to him $1,000, that's like,
This is being recorded, and he's here.
no, that's Botox, so I can't do it. So.
Is that out loud? Okay, good conversation, good conversation.
I'm just honest. But, so, anyway, so my apologies, enjoy the festivities, and I'll probably wake up from my nap and watch it, because I'm gonna be snoozing as much as I can while he drives back. He likes me to be sleeping, trust me. Otherwise, I'm talking a lot.
TMI.
Not drive. So, he doesn't let me drive. So, I will not be here for that. My apologies. And then second, real quick, for the hearing tomorrow morning, I don't see any information. There's, for that student expulsion hearing or whatever it is, and I don't see any information on that to read.
Board docs at all?
I didn't see anything. It says 21 attachments, but nothing is attached.
Okay.
And so,
I don't see it.
And we just got a confirmation from LaTanya about the swearing in and all that. So.
Items are in there. We'll
time
check
is
on
it?
that and get some advisement out right away.
it's at 11 tomorrow.
Oh, it's at 11.
And
Oh, I don't even see
I'm
that
not
on my
able to read
calendar.
anything about what it's on. So that's what I wanted to bring up. And I think really that was it, other than what I can talk about my granddaughter's recital at Edison Park and stuff like that.
Fabulous.
Which was great. It was good.
It was fabulous.
So, and the groundbreaking when that was really good too. And I don't think I can say it correctly still, so I'm gonna. I can't roll it.
Okay, it is on Board Docs, if you go to Board Docs.
I did.
It is on there.
The whole thing?
I just looked it up. Yes, it's on there.
I've been trying.
Refresh yourself.
It has a lock on it, so.
Refresh
there may
yourself.
be-
You probably have to go in officially.
It says I'm logged in. I double checked all that.
And I went on
So-
twice.
I think part of it is that because these are confidential meetings, it's in a separate section in Board Docs now called
Do we have-
Student Hearings.
Do
and
we have
you
to
should-
log in?
No, you just log in normally like you would, You can't do it through public access. You're not going to be able to see it.
It just,
It's
yeah, but it
Going
just
in
said that
here.
authentication has been lost. That may be why you can't get in.
Oh, I see what you're saying, it's locked. I see, but I can't open it.
Same
Okay,
here.
I apologize.
But it
Because I'm
says
looking
that
at it and I can
server's
open
been
it. So
lost.
we'll work on that, Ms. Giovanelli and board. We'll find out what's going on with
She's
that.
exactly right. It tells you a brief synopsis, but it does not allow you to.
There's
read.
21 PDF attachments, and
It's not there, yeah.
no, it's not there for me, and
It's locked.
okay. I see a little lock there,
Yep,
but,
that's why. They have to unlock it.
so but the thing about it is now, I mean, this is tomorrow at 11, and I haven't read it. And if it's 21 pages of something to read, that's a lot between now and then, because I'm busy through this evening. So, I mean, I was able to read the little paragraph, but that's not enough.
And we will present the case as we typically do as well. We'll present the facts and so forth. That's part of our layout of it as well.
I think what Ms. Giovanelli is
People like to
saying
read
is
it, though.
that there are, I don't know how many documents that are attached to this agenda items for this expulsion, and they normally like to review all of the reports and the letters and
it just
all of
came
that
up now.
information.
It comes up, but no matter how you go into it, it's still locked. You can go in the back way, it's still locked, so she's absolutely correct. It's
Because
locked.
I just relogged in.
Yeah.
No, I got it
We're
now.
having trouble with the server, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's saying authentication is lost.
So we'll definitely get that, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. Ms. Giovanelli, did you have any?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Fisher, did you have anything
No,
for
I
good of the order?
I have nothing for the order.
No?
No,
I'm going to ask Ms. Gittens.
except I forgot to ask
Go ahead.
Capital Strategies the question about what would be the feasibility of looking at taking the, you're going to love this.
Okay, good, give it to me.
Taking the millage rate recurring to referendum. Because we need the money for salaries.
I would go ahead and send that
Retain
email
our
to
people.
them, Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, and then bring it back for Ms. Gittens.
No.
I just wanted to make her day.
What meeting are you gonna do that? I feel ill.
Okay, Ms. Gittens?
Okay.
Oh, let me go to Ms.
Here you were elected.
Ms. Gittens, Ms. Gittens, hold on a second, let me ask Ms. Patrica, do you have anything?
Unfortunately, my computer died, and
Ours
so I
did.
don't know how to function without my computer, but I do not know whether there was an answer in the board member update regarding money owed to us by the county commission for operating shelters during Irma. Superintendent Savage, if I may, through the chair. Superintendent Savage, was there an answer provided to that question, please?
To my understanding, yes, there was.
Okay, well, if I can access that information, which I hope to be able to do at some point tonight on some computer that's operating, I may bring that up for good of the order tomorrow, or at a minimum in my board member comments. Thank you, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Gittens.
Okay, I was, first of all, I want to make sure I say this. Thank you to Dr. Carlin, and I believe Ms. Matthews and the staff that was involved in putting the board updates on board docs. And thank you so much. It is so much easier, and you know, you can go back and find things. So thank you so much to everyone that was involved in that. And Ms. Schaefer, oh yes, and Ms. Schaefer, I know. She's just gonna tell me no. But I just publicly want to say thank you, because that was something that had bothered me for quite some time. And I think it's going to be really good in, you know, looking at, we will have at least one new board member, we know. So, two new board members, right? So at least we're preparing the way for those to come to find information easily. I have a couple of other things, but I think I'll bring them up tomorrow. I'm going to suggest that you guys, I was at Charleston Park on Saturday, and I sat down next to a lady. They said she's the oldest one in Charleston Park. She's 90 years old. And I sat down next to her just to have a conversation. And I suggest you go on Gwen Gittins for District 5 and just watch it. I was in tears at the end that I just signed off. She went through slavery and all kinds of things and talking about education, and I'll bring that up tomorrow, but it is a fascinating 20 minutes to watch this 90-year-old clear of mind that took us all the way back to when she was a child. So it was just fascinating to listen to, and about the comparison to education and all that too. Let me see if there's anything else. I will follow up and get this information about the superintendent on the website, and I would ask that it would be a banner on there so people can find it easily. There were a lot of people that are questions, and someone said to me last weekend, somebody said, oh, he's not coming, and somebody said, oh, he's already there, and you were gone, and I don't know where you went, but it was, so we need to just clarify the whole situation and get it out there. Again, the groundbreaking was awesome, and it is a amanecer. And I tried to teach you all to roll your R's, but so what? Anyway, and I'll bring up the rest later. The questions, there was a question I had. I'll bring it up tomorrow and at the end of the briefing if we can.
Is that it, Ms. Gittins?
Yeah, that's it for now.
But you sent us an email.
Oh, the motion.
Say that again?
Yes, and I did work with the attorney about the motion for us to recognize the International Day of Prayer. And I sent you guys an email about it, and I will send out, we worked together on the verbiage, so I will send that revised verbiage out. The premise behind it is that all of us go to the breakfast, we do all of these things, and we celebrate it. So why shouldn't we be able to do that, the students and staff at the schools? I mean, even if it's a moment of silence or something like that during a particular time of the day. Student-led, of course, if they want to do that. But I just think, especially in this time, that we need to be unifying over something that, and I will bring that. And Attorney Bruno, I think I'll send it out this afternoon so everybody can take a look at it. It's short and sweet, so. And I think that's it.
Thank you. I'll have to look for that email. Ms. Vaughn, please.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Gittins. Maybe will be resolved in what Ms. Bruno sends out. But is it a day that encompasses worldwide religions?
Yes.
It's not, yes, any way that, the way it's the verbiage, any way, and to whomever you want to pay homage, but it is basically a time, as I see it, of unity, that if we had a moment of silence, you could be, speaking from, whatever document or whatever you believe, but a time that we all could agree that we need to find something to unify us. Yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I just found it. Go ahead.
To add to what Ms. Gittins said, remember that currently there is law in place since last year that in your homeroom class you have a minute of a moment of silence. So there's already something that's already in there. We also have our statute that discusses students' ability to have religious expression, which is also codified in one of our policies. In addition, this is national. This also is across all particular religions and non-religions. If you don't want to pray, you can just do a moment of silence and meditate.
Okay, yeah, it just, when I first saw it, it concerned me because I thought, okay, we could get criticism from both ends, from people who are not
Right.
in any particular religion or have non-religious bent, and also from the people who are
Atheists.
well, atheists, but then on the other side, that we might get a critique of, well, the people that are Christians, reborn Christians, Christians that might be critical that the day of prayer is not this wide ecumenical service, that it's, so, yeah, I'm going to be interested in seeing what the wording is, and I don't have a problem personally with it, and I just think we have to be really, really careful, because this is a topic that could easily, on both sides and in the middle.
Right, but that's why, when I brought it up and I worked with the attorney, and it had just been done in Palm Beach, I believe, and and Miami-Dade, and my question was, can you check with them to see what they did and all the legalities, and I believe we've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's, and no matter what you do, you're never going to make all the people happy.
Well,
so.
and then who's the author of that? We're not going to say a member of the audience was the author of that, which I could see that taking place.
What do you mean author?
What?
Who's writing this, what that motion will be, and how
It's
that,
already written.
how
We've
that
talked
descriptive is.
I'm sending it out to you.
I'm just worried about, I don't want somebody from the audience saying that they were the ones who put this together.
Is that the
Oh,
truth?
a member of the audience saying that.
Audience.
But is that the truth?
No, that's what I'm saying, because
Oh.
I have had them, we've heard them say before that they have, or we've thanked them for doing things before.
Okay.
So I will piggyback on what Ms. Gittens said. This is something that we worked on together that was legally vetted to make sure that we're in compliance, because of course we have the establishment clause that mandates separation of church and state.
Right.
However, there are areas of the law that does allow legislative bodies to pray prior to meetings and National Day of Prayer, et cetera. And interestingly enough, this is actually a federal law. So 36 U.S.C. Section 119 actually creates, and the law has been there for a long time, but most recently 36 U.S.C. 119 mandates that the President of the United States declare the National Day of Prayer on the first Thursday of every month. So, and it's been constitutionally challenged in 2011, but that failed. So I think that from a legal standpoint, we're probably in good solid ground. When you also add the Florida statute about students and religious expressions, as well as some of the other federal statutes. So I think from a legal standpoint, we're good to go on this.
Right. And as I said, I'm not personally against it. However, considering the current climate, I just want it to be sure that we had, the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and
I believe that we do, and otherwise I'll take the fall.
Well, I would say also.
we don't want anybody to
Yeah,
take
we
the
don't want anybody to take the fall.
Nobody.
I will say also that the motion with discussion with Ms. Gittens is crafted very carefully to ensure that it really abides by the Florida statute of 1002.206, which is the religious expression in schools. So we are very, very careful about that. It's not a blanket motion.
I'm sending it as we speak.
Okay, and I really don't have anything to add.
Ms. Morgan?
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have nothing, that was my concern. I just want to make sure that everybody, that nobody is offended and nobody gets hurt. We're thinking about everybody. I'm all about prayer, but I just want to make sure that everybody is.
Have it now.
everybody is where we need to have them. Ms. DePree-Bruno, do you have anything for good of the order?
I have two things. The first thing is Ms. Morgan had sent an email with regards to an incident that happened with our last student advisory committee where we had a constituent come and wanted to, I think, record, participate. So there's a couple of things to that. I was going to send an email, but I'd much rather see what the board would like for me to do. One, when the board originally had some discussions about this topic.
Excuse me, could you please speak more clearly into the mic, Attorney DePree-Bruno? I'm having a great deal of difficulty hearing you. Thank you.
Yes. When the board originally discussed this, we went from a board student advisory committee to a district student advisory committee because we were very clear that the law with regards to board advisory committees makes that committee fall under sunshine, which means that it is open to the public, and we do have public comment during our advisory committees, and those are filmed. So we went to a district advisory committee. Since that time, law has changed. In November, I believe it was November of 2021, there was a case, Florida Citizens Alliance versus Collier County School Board. I did send an email to the board about that when it came out, that basically now a lot of different committees that are providing, even if it's a superintendent committee, but that is providing some type of delegation of responsibility from the board to come back and make a recommendation to the board to vote on, is going to be open to sunshine. So at this point, this advisory committee, be it board or district or superintendent, is subject to sunshine. So public, it's open to the public can come, can make comments. But so here's what I want to ask from the board. There may be another way to do this. However, I will have to explore it where we go through a route of student government, which is something that one of our sister districts does. And I will have to explore that and see if this is a better alternative for us to have a, just kind of like, think of your DAC, where you have your committees at the school level and then all of them get together at the district level. Something similar to that through your student government, and it filters up. I have to review this because I know some districts have it as an advisory committee that's open. Some districts do it differently. It's more of a student club than an advisory committee. So I would like to know if the board would like me to explore that a little bit and come back with a proposal for the student advisory committee.
Well, I thought that we had changed it to a council so that they would not have, we spoke about that so that they would not have to do that. My concern is we have people are dropping their kids off to us, and then we open it up to whomever want to walk in there, film their children, and do whatever. I have an issue with that because how do we protect these kids from that or whatever that may look like? And Ms. Fisher, I know you.
Well, when we look at the purpose is to give the kids a voice.
Right.
And what they really do is to share their opinions with staff at this point.
Correct.
Regarding the code of conduct, regarding dress code, regarding testing, food.
The issue is that
Is that subject to sunshine?
So things have changed so much.
When did that change, and what is
So
the new
Florida
law?
Citizens Alliance came out, I'm going to say either October or November of 2021. This was a situation where it was about instructional materials. It was a staff committee. There was nobody else in that committee that was involved. And basically, the Supreme Court of Florida basically said that those committees have to be open because the recommendation of whatever this committee is doing is going to the superintendent, and then the superintendent is bringing it to the board for some type of action. So that's one, and that's why that actually is codified now in 1467, House Bill 1467. So there's the legal landscape is changing significantly, and if you want me to explore this further so I can see what options there are, I would be more than happy to do so. And to Ms. Jordan's point, one of the things that we have to be very concerned about too is these forms that the parents are filling out when the students are participating. I would recommend that legal review those forms and vet those forms to make sure that we're covering everything that we need to cover from a liability standpoint.
Were you finished, Ms. Fisher?
She's not.
Yeah.
It's hard. We've had a lot of discussion.
I just really need some more information. I'm gonna look at that, that case and look at 1467, and that's passed, that's.
1467 is very specific to instructional materials. Florida Citizens Alliance is the one that is giving us the guidance that meetings, even if it's amongst staff, that are to make a recommendation to the board. I know, I understand, and it's something that the school board attorneys across the state have been discussing and analyzing and deliberating upon, so I understand.
So what she's saying, okay, I'm sorry.
I hear what you're saying, and I just think that we need more information, because the Florida Citizens Alliance brought a case against a school
Your county.
district,
She said
and
Collier.
then now we have a bill that's passed and become a law.
So we have both the case as well as the law. The law is very specific to instructional materials, but the case has wider implications.
Okay, so, but the kids really don't do anything with instructional materials.
Correct.
It's the threshold test is this committee, doesn't matter if it's kids or not kids. The threshold test is has this committee been delegated authority to make some recommendations to the superintendent, who will bring it to the board for some type of action. So the code of conduct is one of those examples where the superintendent is going to bring this to the board for a vote, and so any committee that's giving some type of recommendation on the code of conduct could be subject to sunshine.
Well,
could be subject to
they're
sunshine.
giving a recommendation, but, I mean, they're giving their opinion, their input. I don't know that they're necessarily officially making a recommendation. And I thought that was why we changed the whole thing.
I agree with you
because we
100%.
wanted to make it safer and simpler for the kids.
That's why we changed it.
And have their voices.
That's exactly right, Ms. Fisher. When we had this discussion, that is exactly why we changed it. But law is changing all the time, so I have 2 laws that have come out that I need to be mindful of. That's why I'm asking if the board wants to direct me to explore this, to find out what options there are to have the same type of.
We need to protect our kids, no matter what. Miss,
May I make a suggestion? As I'm listening to this and what you're saying about the laws, a suggestion came to my mind that if we in some way amended our DAC committee, the way DAC works, when everybody comes in, they split up into rooms after they hear the main thing. So how would it be to possibly have one of those breakout rooms to be students? So in other words, it would all be under the umbrella of DAC and follow all of, those things. They would do the breakout. They would also hear all the things. Some of them can, come with their parents or whatever. Just a thought to make it cleaner and not a separate group. They would still have the opportunity to meet together and, discuss. Maybe they would have different topics than what the rest of the group is discussing, and come back in the end, and when the elementary, middle, and high give their, dissertation as to what they did, they could give an update on what they talked about in their group as well.
yeah, but isn't DAC?
DAC is a board advisory committee. So what I was.
Right.
May I jump in?
Oh, Ms. Patrica, go ahead.
May I suggest that we reach consensus to ask the board attorney to please pursue this further and come back to the board with recommendations?
Yes.
Can we, go ahead, Ms. Vaughn.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that, and also in the meantime, to add to whatever Ms. Dupree Bruno comes up with, if any of us have brainstorms about this or ideas, that we too put that in the mix, and maybe some of them will overlap, or the best thing is to brainstorm it and maybe even wind up putting two things together. So I would like to expand just a little bit on what Mrs. Patrica said and direct Board Attorney Bruno, but include if any of us have ideas on how we might do this, like what Ms. Gittens was saying, that you submit it and we go from there.
And how about Ms. Morgan?
Yes, I have a question. Essentially, right now, these kids are meeting in what I would call a protected environment.
Correct.
So anything that removes those protections, like admitting the public to the district student advisory meetings or district student meetings, I would presume would require them parental acknowledgement and consent to their children being filmed and taped.
They're not filmed in the DAC breakouts.
So that is definitely something that I also, based on what Ms. Jordan was saying and just to what Ms. Morgan is saying, we need to look at our parental consent form for the Student Advisory Committee.
Dr. Savage, do you have something else to add to that?
Well, I mean, definitely that's a good point. Just want to echo that piece about the recordings, whether they were consented or not, just because if a person shows up at these meetings and starts recording on their phone and you've now captured, I think that's an important consideration. I was actually asked just procedurally as a reminder to the board that if we go past 4 o'clock, we'll have to do a 10-minute break for them. Okay.
Yes. We will be.
Yep.
So, Ms.
So
Patrica,
may
go ahead.
I amend the statement regarding the consensus that I seek, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I would like to ask the board for consensus to ask Attorney Dupree Bruno to please seek alternative options for student advisory that are in compliance with the law yet provide appropriate protections, and suggest that any board members who have ideas regarding same get in touch with the board attorney directly so that she can consider those in her deliberations.
Perfect. So can I have a consensus on what Ms. Patrica just mentioned regarding the,
Got it.
Ms., did you get that, Ms. Roman? I would say hopefully before the next student advisory.
Yeah.
I would hope that we could have it before then. So do I have consensus on moving forward with that? And Ms. Patrica, I know you made the motion, and Ms. Morgan?
And a motion, can't vote.
I mean,
Yes,
not a motion,
and
it's not a
I'm a
motion,
thumbs up.
consensus.
I'd like to further ask Attorney Dupree Bruno to please send the entire board a PDF copy of that case that she was discussing from Florida Citizens Alliance. Thank you.
I have already resent the one that I sent last fall.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, that is not a motion. It was a consensus to ask Mr. Bruno to move forward and get us some information. Just want to reiterate that. And then, Mr. Bruno, did you have anything else?
And then the last thing is just a reminder with regards to campaigning. I've gotten some questions posed in terms of parameters for campaigning, and this goes both for school board members, candidates for school board member, or any candidate that's running for office locally, that, or even statewide, honestly. Our board policy 2.04 is very clear that we cannot campaign on school board property. It's very explicit. You cannot campaign on school board property. So please do not do so. Any candidate out there, please do not campaign on school board property. That includes getting petitions signed. That includes passing out flyers, anything else that's related to campaigning. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that staff understood, that the staff can have stickers supporting a particular candidate on their personal vehicle, cannot be on district vehicle, and buttons and those kind of things cannot be, you can't wear them while you're at work, obviously. Any of those types of campaign discussions and those types of things are not allowed while you are working. Hope that clarifies things. Oh, and then the other thing is emails. We're getting emails from candidates. Candidates, please remember that you cannot send emails using district email addresses to campaign. So I'm going to say the same message tomorrow at the briefing, and I'll say it again at the action meeting. We did send something to staff a couple of weeks ago, but we'll continue to remind you so that we're in compliance with board policy.
Thank you. Dr. Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one.
You have 2 minutes. I'm
Yep,
just kidding.
this is just one follow-up. The earlier comment that was made relating to getting into the expulsion folder, according to Ms. Schaefer, basically there was an access issue that she was not really aware of, but it has since been corrected, and that if you just refresh your accounts, you should all have access, and that's per Ms. Schaefer. And that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is fabulous. Look, and it is 2 minutes to spare. So I want to thank you very much for today. Good conversation. And as we complete our day, this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
11 a.m. It was on my phone.
No, but it was, I thought it was on here.
I know.